Chapter 567. If Shu Xiaolu wasn't at Peach Blossom Residence, she must be at the Beast Evaluation Pavilion. Hence, Lin Jin headed there. The teachers in the pavilion obviously didn't dare to stop him. Lin Jin made his way up to the fourth floor, only to see that the paintings were all shrouded in mist. Shu Xiaolu was clearly throwing a tantrum by sealing the paintings, so that even if Lin Jin had Cosmos Ink, he wouldn't be able to enter. Lin Jin looked helpless. This was just like Shu Xiaolu's personality. However, Lin Jin knew that with Shu Xiaolu's remarkable abilities, she must be watching him from somewhere. And so, Lin Jin simply bade farewell to her. Shu Xiaolu, all good things must come to an end. Thank you for taking care of me all this while. Lin Jin is eternally grateful. Having said that, Lin Jin bowed to the sealed paintings on the fourth floor. I'm about to embark on a long journey, so I came here to bid you farewell. As a friend, you shouldn't refuse to see me. Having said that, Lin Jin looked around. No response. It was as if he was performing a one-man show. How silly. However, Lin Jin knew that Shu Xiaolu must be listening. All right, if you're not coming out, I'll be leaving. Having said that, Lin Jin looked around again. Still, there was no movement. Left with no choice, Lin Jin pretended to go downstairs. However, even after he left, Shu Xiaolu still didn't show up. Lin Jin sighed. Obviously, this time, Shu Xiaolu was really angry. But this made Lin Jin feel even worse. He knew that if it was any other time, Shu Xiaolu would definitely come out and threaten him to stop him from leaving. But this time, she knew she couldn't stop him, so she didn't show up. After waiting at the entrance for a long time, Lin Jin had no choice but to summon a cloud and fly away. After Lin Jin left, Shu Xiaolu's silhouette appeared outside the Beast Evaluation Pavilion. Her eyes were slightly swollen as she looked up at the black dot in the sky, her fists clenched so tightly that they cracked. Coincidentally, Zhong Zifeng had returned. Upon seeing Shu Xiaolu, he quickly bowed. Without a word, Shu Xiaolu turned to leave. But after taking 2 steps, as if remembering something, she stopped. Xiao Zhong, I'll be staying at Peach Blossom Residence from now on. If you need anything, just look for me there. But for the next few days, no one is allowed to come. Having said that, she disappeared in a flash. Lin Jin could tell that Shu Xiaolu was in a bad mood. Lin Jin felt lost as well. However, he knew that Shu Xiaolu didn't like to be separated by death, so he could understand why she didn't want to come out. Soon, Lin Jin suppressed this thought. Shu Xiaolu was in Merak, and they would meet again in the future. Why should he be sad over this? Lin wasn't heading back to the Jade Dragon Kingdom. There were many things written in the Tao Lord's heavenly book, including the whereabouts of several magic treasures. Magic treasures were something that everyone praised after using. Taking Lin Jin as an example, the immortal binding rope in his hand was incredibly powerful. In crucial moments, it could play a crucial role. Just like the time he fought the zombie, it was thanks to the immortal binding rope that he managed to trap the creature inside the painting. Lin Jin knew that he had made quite a few enemies and that he would inevitably have to face a strong foe in the future, so it was always good to have more useful items. As the #1 expert 500 years ago and now an immortal, Taoist Lords Lin Xiaolu's treasures were no small matter. However, after being gravely injured by the rank 9 immortal devouring beast, he knew he didn't have long to live, so he made arrangements for his funeral. Other than a few of his treasures which he passed on to his disciples, the rest were hidden in various secluded places. Some places might be hard to imagine as places with hidden treasures. Back then, Xiaolu was one of Taoist Lord's treasures. However, he didn't pass it on to the insect cultivator. Instead, the insect cultivator somehow found the treasure and took it away. Although this wasn't mentioned in Taoist Lord's Tian book, Lin Jin could deduce it based on the clues he left behind. Lin Jin's next target was an artifact called the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. According to Taoist Lord's heavenly book, this artifact was obtained from an immortal's ruin. However, Taoist Lord didn't really put to use. According to Taoist Lord, this artifact didn't suit him. However, after figuring out the Four Seas Freedom Gourd's function, Lin Jin decided that the first thing he wanted to get his hands on was this artifact. It wasn't suitable for Taoist Lord, but it was definitely suitable for Curator. All this while, Lin Jin had wanted Curator to have some unique skills that stood out from masses. Flames were Lin Jin's signature skill. Curator had always been using fire, so his skills were rather monotonous. However, if he could get his hands on the Four Seas gourd, coupled with the water reservoir armor, it could unleash immense power. Lin Jin was certain of this. According to Taoist Lord's Tian book, the Four Seas gourd was located somewhere in northwest Liang State. It was quite a distance away, so Lin Jin immediately headed there. Now that Lin Jin's cultivation level had increased, his spirit energy capacity had exceeded 500 points. He could also regenerate them in an orderly fashion, so traveling on a cloud for long periods of time wouldn't be a problem. Moreover, his speed wouldn't be any slower than riding an eagle. With this, he could just ride on a cloud, and he could even practice his cloud riding skills. 3 days later, Lin Jin arrived at Liang State. Among the many large states in the world, Liang State was considered relatively small. It had many mountains and little water, and the climate was dry, making it uninhabited. Liang State didn't have a premium country or even an intermediate kingdom. However, it did have 7 to 8 small countries. Compared to the other states, Liang State was incomparable. The country was sparsely populated, the mountains were dangerous, and the land was treacherous. Naturally, it became a hiding place for many fugitives, evil experts, and fugitives. It was said that most of the small countries in the Liangzhou region were founded by evil experts and fugitives. Of course, the people living here were not easy to deal with. As the saying went, different environments nurtured different people. Anyway, as Lin Jin arrived on a cloud, all he saw was a desolate landscape. In Lin Jin's words, this place wasn't suitable for humans to live in. But this was how nature worked. When a door was closed, a window would always open. Although Liang State was desolate, it was an important transportation route. If one traveled by land, they would have to pass through northern and central states, or even eastern continent to reach southern and grassy continents. Of course, they could choose to take a detour, but the price of taking a detour was too high, and the distance was twice as long. Because of this, Liangzhou was able to support a group of people. Some people stayed here and relied on robbing and collecting tolls to make a living. Moreover, this kind of free life was quite comfortable. The reason why Tao Lord hid the Four Seas unrestrained gourd in a desolate and dangerous place like Liang State was written in Tao Lord's heavenly book. Back when Tao Lord traveled here, he felt that Liang State was dry and desolate due to the lack of rain. Thus, he left the Four Seas unrestrained gourd in a temple and set up a formation. Every few months, the formation would automatically activate, using the Four Seas unrestrained gourd's boundless water to shower Liang State with rain. With this, Tao Lord naturally hoped that Liang State could become like the other states. With arable land, the people would no longer have to rob others and reap without sowing. These were all things written in Tao Lord's heavenly book. It was clear that Tao Lord had good intentions back then. However, reality was completely different from what Tao Lord imagined. Chapter 568. As far as Lin Jin knew, for the past few centuries, Liangzhou was still the same as it used to be. Nothing had changed. There was no doubt that Taoist Lord arrangements had gone awry. At the very least, Taoist Lord couldn't fix this. Now that Lin Jin was here, he could find out why Liangzhou was still so desolate and dangerous even after the Four Seas calabash gourd was left behind. The location mentioned in the heavenly book was only a rough estimate. It was said to be at Mount Five Palms in Liangzhou. Lin Jin noticed a small village below him. Intrigued, he descended on a cloud. He planned to ask around. This area was like a desert with only a few oases. This village was built on one of these oases, and it seemed like it had been here for quite some time. There weren't many houses, at most 7 or 8 of them. They were small in scale. After entering, Lin Jin didn't see anyone. The ground was mostly made up of sand and gravel. There was an occasional patch of grass, but most of them were withered. Most of the houses were made of wood mixed with mud and hay. They didn't look sturdy and seemed like they would break at the slightest touch. Just then, an old man came out. At the sight of Lin Jin, his eyes lit up, and he strode over. The old man looked to be in his 60s, but he was skinny. His hair was a mess, and his clothes hadn't been washed for who knows how long. His hair was unkempt, and his face was dirty. As Liangzhou was windy and sandy, the old man's face was covered in a layer of dirt. Just by looking at this old man, Lin Jin could tell that the people of Liangzhou lived a tough life. Lin Jin saluted, but the old man had already walked over. He took out a knife with practiced ease and placed it against Lin Jin's neck. "The fat sheep is here." The old man spoke with a slight Liangzhou accent. It sounded like he was singing a folk song. In the next moment, more than 10 men emerged from the bushes in the dilapidated house. They varied in height and weight, but their clothes were tattered. They looked like beggars. However, these people clearly weren't beggars. Would beggars come here with knives and axes in their hands? Besides these people, there were also a few skinny hounds. They looked like local breeds with large heads and mouths full of sharp teeth. They were quite intimidating. Soon, Lin Jin was surrounded by this group of people. At this moment, there were at least 3 sharp knives pressed against his neck. His stomach and the back of his waist were also pressed against by someone with a dagger. A few dogs came over and sniffed nonstop. Most people would be scared out of their wits if they encountered such a situation. Lin Jin, on the other hand, fared better. Thanks to his cultivation, he was protected by a layer of invisible 5 elemental armor. Average swords and blades couldn't possibly hurt him. Things were getting interesting now. Lin Jin didn't move. Instead, he glanced at the dozen menacing men around him and asked, "Judging by your menacing appearance and attire, if I'm not mistaken, you must be robbers here to rob others?" At this time, a fierce-looking man with a large beard shouted, "What nonsense are you spouting? Consider yourself unlucky today. You actually barged into our ox village. If you know what's good for you, leave all the gold and silver on you, or else." Before he could finish, someone beside him said in a daze, "Boss, I don't think this person is carrying any luggage. I'm afraid he doesn't have any money on him. Am I blind?" Annoyed, the boss reprimanded his subordinate before glaring at Lin Jin and saying, "Judging by your extraordinary attire, you must be from a wealthy family. Write a letter and tell your family to bring 500 taels of silver. Once you've paid up, we'll let you go. If you don't have any money, I'm sorry, but we'll have to kill you and make you into stew. It's been a long time since we've had meat." Having said that, he burst into laughter. The other men followed suit. "Ha ha ha!" Lin Jin laughed too, and he laughed even louder. At this, the boss and his men were clearly stunned as they held back their laughter. In the next instant, Lin Jin reached out and grabbed one of the men's axes. With a squeeze of his hand, the axe was instantly shattered. The old axe-wielding man's eyes widened. "Brothers, this is a tough one. Release the dogs." The boss reacted quickly. With a roar, someone whipped out a whistle and blew on it. The whistle was used to control the hound beasts. Usually, when a dog whistle was blown, the hound beasts would immediately bite the enemy. But this time, no matter how hard the whistle was blown, the hound beasts seemed to be pressed to the ground by a giant hand. They all lowered their heads, and none of them dared to get up. I refused to believe this. The boss raised the axe in his hand and swung it at the hound beasts. The northwest wind blew, a little chilly. As the sand flew, the ground was littered with broken axes and blades. Some of them had been twisted beyond recognition. The boss and his men squatted on the ground, trembling as they held their heads in their hands. This posture was taught to them by the old man, so they didn't dare to disobey. Ever since they were defeated so easily just now, the great leader and the others were humiliated to realize that they had kicked an iron plate this time. Fortunately, the man didn't kill them. He only made them squat with their heads in their hands and answer his questions. For example, where was this place, which part of Liangzhou it belonged to, or whether they had ever heard of Mount Five Palms. The boss answered whatever was on his mind, not daring to hide anything. They were truly frightened. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that if it weren't for the fact that they hadn't drunk water for a long time and couldn't pee, they would have wet their pants by now. The boss and his men were afraid of death too. It wasn't easy to survive in Liangzhou. Therefore, no one who could survive wanted to die. Mount Five Palms was a famous place in Liangzhou. It wasn't because of the beautiful scenery, but because it was the base of the water god cult. Liangzhou was severely short of water, and it just so happened that the water god cult controlled the largest water source in Liangzhou. Anyone who wanted water had to go to the water god cult. Whether it was a small country in Liangzhou or a group of poor commoners like the boss and his men, it was the same. When Lin Jin heard the boss and his men referring to them as poor commoners, he chuckled inwardly. These people sure were thick-skinned. Earlier, they had been acting so menacing, calling themselves bandits and robbers. Now that they had kicked a steel plate, they called them poor commoners. But then again, Lin Jin didn't plan on doing anything to them. These people were just regular people who didn't know any spells or martial arts. Malnourished and lacking water for a long time, they looked no different from refugees. Even their hounds were the most ordinary of people. With Lin Jin's current capabilities, there was no need for him to make things difficult for these commoners. Moreover, these people had been living tough lives. As for Mount Five Palms and the Water God cult, Lin Jin had a plan in mind. The Daelord's divine scroll didn't mention the Water God cult. In other words, the Water God cult only appeared after the Daelord's death. By asking the boss and his men, this speculation was more or less confirmed. In other words, the Water God cult was born in the past few centuries. A few centuries wasn't a short period of time. Based on the current situation, at least in Liangzhou, the Water God cult was undoubtedly the overlord. According to the boss and his men, the Water God cult controlled the water source. More than half of Liangzhou's population had to rely on them to survive. Based on this, one could tell how powerful the Water God cult was. Chapter 569. Coincidentally, the place where Daelord hid the Four Seas gourd was also at Mount Five Palms. The base of Water God Order was also there, so Lin Jin couldn't help but link the two together. Could it be that the Four Seas gourd has been taken by someone else? Lin Jin mumbled to himself as his heart sank. Water God Order was in charge of Liangzhou's water source, and Liangzhou didn't have any water source other than the Four Seas gourd, so there must be a connection between the two. While Lin Jin was deep in thought, the sandstorm grew so strong that it was hard to keep one's eyes open. The great head and the others seemed to have realized something as their faces changed drastically, revealing looks of horror. This hero, that yellow wind monster is coming. Let's hurry up and hide. If we delay any longer, I'm afraid it'll be too late. The great leader said with a long face. Lin Jin snapped out of his daze and scanned his surroundings, noticing the anomaly as well. A strong gust of wind was sweeping up the sand. Although there was wind before, it shouldn't have changed so quickly. Something was clearly wrong. Moreover, there was a distinct demonic aura amidst the sandstorm. Lin Jin knew that a monster was casting a spell, and by the looks of it, the monster's cultivation level wasn't low either. The leader and the others seemed to know what was going on. Lin Jin went over to ask, and then cast a small spell. Instantly, an invisible air barrier appeared within a 10-meter radius, preventing the sandstorm from entering. Seeing this, the leader and the others weren't dumb. They knew that they had encountered a true expert. All of them kowtowed at once and answered Lin Jin's questions without reservation. It turned out that their village used to be called Ox Village. Although Liangzhou was a desolate place, with the help of the oasis's water source, the dozen or so families in the village lived a peaceful life. However, humanity in Liangzhou was on the decline, and monsters were everywhere. Ox Village used to be able to survive because of the old village chief. The old village chief had some mysterious means to fend off monster invasions. But after the old village chief passed away, Ox Village lost its backer and immediately fell into decline. After all, no one could stop monsters from coming to eat people every now and then. A good village had declined just like that, and they could only rely on robbing to survive. It could be said to be miserable. Lin Jin was puzzled. To put it bluntly, these people were mere mortals. Forget a powerful monster cultivator. Even a monster with a few tricks up its sleeve could easily devour them. Under normal circumstances, They shouldn't have been able to survive until now. But in reality, they had really struggled at death's door for such a long time. This was strange. After further questioning, Lin Jin finally understood what was going on. The yellow wind monster is the most powerful. When it comes, the other monsters don't dare to come. It comes every month, and every time it comes, it must capture a person. In the beginning, there were more than 50 people in our village, but after 2 years, less than half are left. As he spoke, the great head actually started crying. However, in Lin Jin's opinion, the other party was more likely acting. So Liang province is actually this chaotic. Although the great head and the others weren't exactly good people, they were just trying to survive. Lin Jin wasn't in a position to judge them. All he could say was that Liang province wasn't peaceful, human lives were worthless, and the ways of the world were unpredictable. However, since they happened to run into each other, if Lin Jin were to leave, someone in this group would surely suffer. Moreover, according to the great head, there were more than 20 people in their village, but there were only 11 here. After asking around, Lin Jin found out that there were still some women and children hiding in the nearby caves. As for the elderly, they were the first to be captured. Moreover, they did so willingly to protect the youngsters. Lin Jin could feel the monster energy around him growing thicker. Instead, he purposely suppressed his aura to appear like an ordinary person. Lin Jin didn't want to scare the yellow wind monster away. He was curious about how many monsters there were in Liang province. Also, as the curator, he had an idea a long time ago. It was a method to improve his curator status. However, it was a grand plan. Lin Jin knew very well that it wasn't something that could be accomplished in a short period of time, but he needed to take the first step. The people of Ox Village were pitiful people. Although they had become bandits, they were forced by their circumstances, so Lin Jin didn't blame them for it. The Liangzhou was very big, and there were many places like the Ox Village. If everyone lived in a precarious situation and had to rely on robbing others to survive, then the Liangzhou would truly be like hell on earth. Since he was here to retrieve the Four Seas Freedom Gourd, Lin Jin had to help the Tao Lord fulfill his dying wish and return peace to Liang province. The wind grew stronger and the yellow sand covered the area. However, neither the wind nor the sand could reach within 10 meters of Lin Jin. The great head and the others were dumbfounded at this scene, feeling even more reverent. Just then, a strange laugh came from the yellow sand. Then, a tall figure approached. It was as if he was looking at someone through a layer of blurred glass. The figure walked closer and coldly snorted. "Where did this Jianghu magician come from? You actually dare to play dumb in front of me, Master Huang. You even set up a barrier." Having said that, the figure raised his hand and slammed it against the barrier Lin Jin had set up. It was obvious that the other party was extremely confident. However, this confident slap was met with a series of blows. Smack! With a loud bang, the figure's palm landed on the barrier Lin Jin had set up. As a result, he was repelled and almost fell to the ground. The figure was no fool. He had used more than 80% of his strength in that attack, but he couldn't break this seemingly transparent barrier. This could only mean that the spellcaster was far more capable than him. Hence, after failing his first attack, the figure immediately left. Unfortunately, Lin Jin wouldn't let him. In a flash, Lin Jin was already outside the barrier, blocking the figure's path. The figure's appearance could now be seen clearly. It was a tall and skinny man with a strong physique. However, his beast claws and head made him look more like a beast. Lin Jin had seen similar situations before. It was probably due to a lack of proficiency in transfiguration, or perhaps the transfiguration technique he cultivated was flawed. Needless to say, this was the weasel the leader had been talking about. Judging from the creature's half-human, half-beast facial features, it should be a weasel. It even looked a little silly and adorable. It had a tail behind it that exuded a thick, demonic aura. It must have been specially refined into a supernatural power. The monster was startled to be stopped by Lin Jin, but as expected of a monster, its ferocity overrode its rationality. Courting death. With a flick of the weasel's tail, a strong gust of wind whipped up and yellow sand danced in the air. Amidst the gust of wind, Lin Jin could vaguely sense a sharp aura coming from the front. Lin Jin didn't dodge, because it wasn't necessary. He cultivated the 5 elemental armor to improve his defense. While this monster might seem ferocious, in terms of rank and strength, it was far inferior to Lin Jin's. Even if Lin Jin stood still, the monster wouldn't be able to break Lin Jin's armor. Sure enough, the moment the weasel's wind blades came into contact with Lin Jin, they shattered instantly. Chapter 570. The monster was horrified. Knowing it was no match for Lin Fan, it scampered away in fear. It wasn't stupid. The 8 slashes from its tail was its strongest attack, yet Lin Fan managed to neutralize it without even lifting a finger. It didn't even leave a scratch on its skin. This only meant that the difference in strength between them was too great. It could only run. Unfortunately, Lin Jin took a step forward and blocked the monster's path again. If I were you, I'd behave myself. You won't be able to escape if you keep running around like this, Lin Jin advised kindly. The yellow weasel understood what was going on and didn't dare to attack again. After all, it had already used all of its strength just now. But the other party didn't even lift a finger to counter it. The other party was much stronger than it, and if it didn't know what was good for it, it would probably end up in a miserable state. The next moment, the wind stopped and the sand fell to the ground. The chief's group hid far away, not daring to approach, but they didn't run away either. One of them wanted to run, but was stopped by the chief. When asked why, the chief remained silent and focused on the situation with a glint in his eyes. Facing Lin Jin, the weasel felt immense pressure. Imitating a human, the weasel bowed with both hands clasped before saying, "I am Huang Qi, one of the 72 flag bearers under Black Wind Cave's lord. May I know who you are? Why are you making things difficult for our Black Wind Cave?" It might seem like he was admitting defeat, but it was actually a threat. It meant that he had a backer, so he should be more careful with his words. Unbeknownst to him, Lin Jin was getting more curious. In the past, monsters like Hu Yuzhen from Mount Songliang had always fought alone. Even great monsters like Heavenly Jade's Black Tortoise didn't form a group. It was indeed rare to encounter a group of demon cultivators in the Liang province. Also, according to Huang Qi, there were many monsters in Black Wind Cave. There were cave masters and 72 flag leaders. There were probably even more monsters and small beasts. Lin Jin was delighted. He might be able to broaden his horizons on this trip to Liangzhou. Also, he wanted to record these monsters into the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Also, as Curator didn't have a pet beast, Lin Jin thought of giving Curator a monster-level helper after witnessing the Black Tortoise's ferocity back in Heavenly Jade. This way, Curator would have something to rely on in the future. Of course, monsters were ever-changing and difficult to control, but Lin Jin had other methods. There was a formula for beast food in the feed house. One could use the feed house to prepare a type of demon sealing pill. To Lin Jin, this thing was just like Mount Heaven Maiden's life and death talisman. It was a sinister and overbearing method to control others. Although it was a little cruel, the effect was definitely great. This way, not only would the Curator have a powerful helper, but he could also enforce justice on behalf of the heavens and help get rid of the demons that plague time. It could be said to be killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Over the past few days, Lin Jin had taken the time to concoct several monster sealing pills at the feed mill. After consuming one, the user had to eat it again every 100 days, or else the monster sealing pill would take effect and the user would be in pain for several days, living a life worse than death. Then, the power of the pill would seal the monster's soul, petrifying the user's physical body. From then on, the user wouldn't be able to die even if they wanted to. Instead, they would have to endure endless torture. It was indeed vicious, but to Lin Jin, this method wouldn't be a problem if it was used to deal with monsters that had committed all sorts of evil deeds. In Lin Jin's own words, this was salvation. Making monsters forsake darkness for light was a good deed. At this thought, Lin Jin glanced at Huang Qi. The monster looked like a rank 3 monster who had cultivated his hyoid bone and could speak human language. However, His transformation skills were a mess. His current half-human, half-beast form looked rather odd. Lin Jin walked over, and Huang Qi stumbled back in fear. Blood surged from Lin Jin's body as he borrowed the strength of his second blood-contracted pet beast, the ghost blood beast, to reach out and grab Huang Qi's neck. The monster was more than half a head taller than Lin Jin, but with his neck in Lin Jin's grip, he couldn't break free no matter how hard he struggled. "Open your mouth." Lin Jin tightened his grip, and Huang Qi screamed in pain as his mouth was forced open. A monster sealing pill was shoved into his mouth. "Swallow it." There was a hint of anticipation in Lin Jin's voice. This was his first time using a monster sealing pill. A rank 3 monster had no chance against Lin Jin. After swallowing the monster sealing pill, Lin Jin let go of Huang Qi. The latter looked terrified. What did you feed me?" Without beating around the bush, Lin Jin explained the effects of the monster sealing pill. "Do you understand now? From today onwards, your life is mine." Huang Qi's eyes darted around before he turned to run. He clearly didn't believe Lin Jin. Invoking a spell, Lin Jin softly chanted. Huang Qi, who had just taken a few steps, froze and fell to the ground. Unable to move his body, he was in excruciating pain as if thousands of needles were stabbing him. It was a horrifying feeling, but it only took a moment for Huang Qi to calm down. Lin Jin had merely used a specialized spell to activate the monster sealing pill's effects. The actual effect left Lin Jin very satisfied. Of course, the monster sealing pill wasn't perfect. It had its own flaws and weaknesses. However, if Lin Jin didn't say anything, no one would know. After being subdued by the monster sealing pill, Huang Qi dared not resist anymore. After all, he had suffered before, and he didn't want to experience that pain a second time. Inside an abandoned wooden house in Ox Village, the chief and the others were tidying up the place while Lin Jin sat by the side, munching on a bunch of grapes. Grapes were a local specialty. Although Liangzhou was dry, there were some fertile oases where the soil was fertile. Due to the climate, the grapes here were extremely fragrant and sweet. Ox Village had quite a few of them, and they were considered the best they could offer. Lin Jin had also seen the women and children the boss had mentioned. They were all emaciated, and Lin Jin could no longer bring himself to think about being robbed by this group of robbers. It won't be peaceful around here for the next few days. Find a safe place to hide. Lin Jin had his own plans. But no matter what, fights and killings were inevitable. If the chief and the other commoners stayed behind, they might be dragged into it. Hence, it was for their own good to advise them to leave. The chief nodded and arranged for a few men to take the women and children away. He and a few other strong men stayed behind. They went up to Lin Jin and knelt on the ground. "Sir, we're all uncultured people. We've offended you before, but not only did you not blame us, you even protected us when that yellow wind monster came. We'll never forget your kindness. I think you must be here for something big. Although I'm not talented, I'm willing to lend you a hand." Having said that, he kowtowed. The men beside him also kowtowed in salute. Lin Jin looked at the chief in surprise, musing, "This man is a smart one." Had it been an average person, they would have run as far away as they could without getting involved. But this Niu Pai was clearly more far-sighted. Chapter 571. To an average person, getting involved in this was a dangerous endeavor. But at the same time, great rewards were always accompanied by danger. Because this was an opportunity for Niu Pai and the others. An opportunity to rise above the masses, or at least master some unique skills. Clearly, an axe and cleaver for chopping firewood were far from enough to survive in Liangzhou. After some thought, Lin Jin nodded in agreement. Niu Pai and the others were more familiar with the local situation. Lin Jin's plan was to first subdue the monsters in Black Wind Cave before heading to Mount Five Palms to retrieve the Four Seas Gourd. However, the fact that Water God cult could exist for hundreds of years and even control most of Liangzhou's water source proved that they weren't easy to deal with. Having Niu Pai and the others to help him gather information was bound to be beneficial. Lin Jin wouldn't deny this. After some thought, Lin Jin raised his hand and flicked a few pills to Niu Pai and the others. This is a blood pact pill I refined. If you have a pet beast with a blood pact, feed it to it. Any pet beast below rank 2 will evolve immediately. Also, if you don't have a pet beast with a blood pact, drip your own blood on this pill if you fancy a wild beast outside. Then think of a way to feed it to those beasts so you can form a blood pact with them. These were some of the benefits Lin Jean had received in advance. After all, Neopai and the others were too weak. No matter how one looked at it, Lin Jean should give them some ability to protect themselves. They didn't have to be too strong, but they had to be stronger than an average person. Otherwise, it would be troublesome for Lin Jean if they died while scouting for information in the future. Neopai and the others were overjoyed at this. They quickly took the blood pact pills with both hands and distributed one to each of them. Go and hide for now. Lin Jean waved his hand, and Neopai and the others immediately retreated obediently. After settling these trivial matters, Lin Jean summoned Huang Qi over to ask about Black Wind Cave in detail. Black Wind Cave was considered a remarkable place in Liangzhou. It belonged to a major force of monster cultivators. There were many monsters in Liangzhou. Due to the decline of humanity here, monsters naturally had the opportunity to take advantage of it. Hence, there were many monster forces in Liangzhou. Black Wind Cave was at least in the top 3. There were almost 100 monsters in the cave who could transform. The most powerful one was the Black Wind Cave's master. Just below him were the 72 flag leaders. Huang Qi was one of them. The Black Wind Cave's sphere of influence was very large, covering a radius of several hundred miles. They kept the humans within the radius of several hundred miles. When they needed to, they would capture humans and use them as food. Demonic beasts eating humans was nothing new in Liang province. Just like Ox Village, they were forced to give up one person every month. This was just one village, and there were hundreds of villages of various sizes within a radius of several hundred miles. In this month, 100 to 200 people were sent here as sacrifices. Thankfully, the Black Wind Cave Master knew that he could not eat them all in one go. That was why he took them once a month. The people within a few hundred kilometers were in fact reared by fey beasts. They were no different from livestock. Lin Jean shook his head. It was hard to imagine that Liangzhou's humanity had deteriorated to this extent. This was also because the Liang province did not have a large country to oversee it, and it did not even have an intermediate country. The human race here was like a plate of loose sand, and when they encountered a demon beast, they naturally did not have the slightest ability to resist. By the way, isn't there still the Water God sect? Lin Jean suddenly thought of this and asked Huang Qi about it. The Water God sect is powerful, but they have a good relationship with our Black Wind Cave. Our cave master often visits them as a guest. Huang Qi was much more well-behaved now. It couldn't be helped. Once they met Lin Jean, they couldn't be dishonest, even if they wanted to, unless they wanted to die. According to Huang Qi, the Water God sect was indeed Liangzhou's dominant force. They could even be considered a premium country in Liangzhou. Lin Jean listened attentively. Combining what Neopai and the others had said, he had a basic understanding of the Water God sect. To put it simply, they were nothing. In any case, Lin Jean didn't have a good impression of the Water God sect. Moreover, he still had to make a trip to Mount Five Palms, so he had to retrieve the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. But before that, Lin Jean planned to recruit the monsters of Black Wind Cave. In the eyes of others, these monsters that looked ferocious and loved to feast on human flesh were like treasures to Lin Jean. Using the monster sealing pill, Lin Jean could control these hundreds of monsters. Once he had them under his control, he could teach them orthodox cultivation techniques. In the future, no matter where he went, they would be a formidable force. Lin Jean planned to use these monsters as his curator's defense against enemies. In the future, if they encountered a strong foe, they would be able to shine instead of being a bystander like before. That's not right. When the time comes, I'll still have to rely on bystanders. Lin Jean suddenly thought of this and shook his head. Speaking of which, using the monster sealing pill to control the monsters and then using the museum's demonic cultivation techniques to enhance their strength wasn't something Lin Jean came up with alone. Daelor's divine book had the same idea. Lin Jin felt that great minds thought alike. In this world, ferocious beasts ruled supreme. Back then, Dalord had taken the wrong path. His cultivation had reached the immortal realm, but so what? In the end, didn't he still die of depression after being gravely injured by a rank 9 immortal devouring beast? Hence, Dalord's painting mentioned that Lin Jin had to refine a rank 9 pet beast. Only then could he fight the immortal devouring beast. With predecessors paving the way for him, Lin Jin wouldn't make the same mistake again. This time, Huang Qi revealed everything he knew. For example, according to Black Wind Cave's style of doing things, if he didn't return after the allotted time, Black Wind Cave would send other flag bearers to look for him. These words were meant to instill fear in Lin Jin, but when Lin Jin heard them, an idea popped into his head. This is perfect for wiping out all of Black Wind Cave's monsters in one fell swoop. But if I head there directly, no matter how strong I am, I might not be able to fend off an encirclement of 100 monsters. But if I take them down one by one, it'll be a piece of cake, Lin Jin mumbled to himself. He liked Black Wind Cave's style of doing things. At the sight of this terrifying man smile, Huang Qi couldn't help but feel uneasy. He mused, is this man really not afraid? If he wants to wait, then let him wait. If Lin Jin didn't return, Black Wind Cave would send at least 3 flag bearers and many monsters. This man was powerful, but he might not be a match for 3 flag bearers. Most importantly, Huang Qi knew where he stood. Among the 72 flag bearers, he was considered a bottom-feeder existence. Hence, he assumed that it was his own fault for being subdued this time. However, the other flag bearers were different. They were truly powerful experts. Hence, although Huang Qi didn't dare to show it on his face, he was secretly looking forward to it, hoping that someone would come and save him. Chapter 572. Lin Jin obviously wouldn't just wait around. There were so many monsters to deal with this time, so it was necessary to be prepared. As the sun set, dusk arrived. Just then, a group of people arrived outside Ox Village. They seemed to be on their way, but they moved like the wind and didn't speak to each other. While it seemed normal, upon closer inspection, one would notice that something was off. Although this group of people looked no different from normal people, they seemed to lack a trace of vitality. Especially when they appeared at dusk, they gave off a strange vibe. The group of people entered Ox Village, obviously looking for something. However, they didn't find anything. They couldn't be blamed for this because Lin Jin had already set up a formation to conceal the situation on his side. Even if that group of people walked right in front of Lin Jin and Huang Qi, they wouldn't notice at all. Huang Qi was also dumbfounded as he watched. Be it the creature or Lin Jin, they both knew that these seemingly ordinary people were actually just poltergeists under the monster's control. These creatures didn't dare to come out when the sun was at its peak, and would only come out at dusk. As the saying went, if there were starved ghosts, there must be tiger demons. Lin Jin had encountered something like this before, and it reminded him of Hu Yuzhen from Mount Songliang. He wondered how strong this tigress was, and if she would listen to him and stop eating humans for fun. The group of strange, starved ghosts didn't notice anything. They were now scattered all over Ox Village, each standing still with a glint in their eyes. Then they shouted in unison, "Welcome, Bloody Wind Flag Master, Flaming Wind Flag Master, and Een Wind Flag Master." This time, the main characters had arrived. Lin Jin perked up. Just as Huang Qi had said, there were 3 flag masters this time. A gust of cold wind blew up ahead and black fog surged. Soon, 3 people walked out. These 3 people all had different appearances, but they were more like humans than Huang Qi. They did not look like half-human, half-beast. Just from this, one could tell that the strength of these 3 people was much stronger than Huang Qi, who was just a dabbler. At least, their transfiguration skills were decent. These 3 monsters were made up of 2 males and 1 female. One of them had a big head and walked like the wind. His whole body was filled with killing intent. Another man had a head full of red hair like flames. The last woman was feminine. Her clothes were bare, and her face was covered with a thin veil. She had a mysterious and exotic style. More than 10 poltergeist ghosts walked over and knelt down in front of the big-headed man. Reporting to the flagmaster, there is no trace of the yellow wind flagmaster, nor is there anyone else. A haunt ghost respectfully reported. Strange. At this time, the big head's expression was not good. A pair of gloomy eyes swept around. Although Huang Feng's cultivation is not good, he is at least one of the flag leaders. It is impossible for him to deal with ordinary people. How could he suddenly disappear? As he spoke, the other two flag masters also walked over and looked around. Bloodwind flagmaster, Ox Village has already been reduced to such a state. Could it be that the people here escaped, so Huang Feng went to other places to catch them? The red-haired man analyzed. That can't be. Even if that's the case, he should have returned long ago. Although Huang Feng isn't much of a threat, he wouldn't dare violate the cave's rules. Something must have happened, the only female monster said. Suddenly, as if she sensed something, she raised her arm. Immediately, more than 10 snakes flew out from her sleeves and slithered around. One of them landed right where Lin Jin was, and the camouflage spell around him rippled. He had been discovered. While Lin Jin was shocked, he didn't hesitate. With a flick of his wrist, several silver needles flew out. Lin Jin's acupuncture skills had now reached an incredible level. Although these three monsters were much stronger than Huang Qi, they were still nothing to Lin Jin. With the silver needles flying out, the camouflage spell was broken. The three monsters were startled, but they reacted quickly enough. Unfortunately, Lin Jin's needles were even faster. First up was the man with fiery red hair. Just as he was about to spit out a ball of fire, his acupuncture points were pierced by 2 needles. With a wail, he collapsed to the ground, unable to get up. Sensing danger, the brawny man let out a tiger's roar, but it was useless. Then, just like the red-haired man, his acupuncture points were pierced by the needles, rendering him immobile. The remaining Wind flagmaster used several substitute snakes to block the needles. Knowing that he wasn't a match for Lin Jin, he immediately fled. Lin Jin obviously wouldn't let him escape. The oppressive aura of a ferocious beast came crashing down. Although the Wind flagmaster was a rank 4 monster, at Lin Jin's current level, a rank 4 monster was nothing. The needles flew out, and this time, the Wind flagmaster followed in the footsteps of its 2 companions. It was a one-sided slaughter. Huang Qi had witnessed the entire process, and he was trembling in fear. This was too powerful. Any one of the 3 flagmasters, Shui Feng, Hua Feng, and Wind, were much stronger than him. Yet, all 3 of them were subdued in just 2 moves. This was unbelievable. Huang Qi was so frightened that he didn't dare to move. This time, he didn't need to use the monster sealing pill because he was truly afraid. Without exception, the same went for the 3 new flag chiefs. They were fed a monster sealing pill by Lin Jin. At first, they were stubborn and fierce, but after suffering once, they became obedient. Watching the 3 flag masters wail in pain under the control of the monster sealing pill, Huang Qi felt a strange feeling for some reason. There was even a hint of smugness and schadenfreude. It was as if he was saying, "What I've suffered before, you guys should suffer once too." At the same time, this made Huang Qi understand that if he wanted to live, he had to obey this man's orders. His mentality began to change. Lin Jin interrogated the 3 newly captured flag bearers as well. Now that Lin Jin was experienced, he knew that after consuming a monster sealing pill, there was basically no way for them to turn the tables around unless they died. It was just a matter of suffering more or less. In less than 4 hours, the trio became well-behaved. By having Huang Qi explain the rules to them, Lin Jin had the intention of letting Huang Qi take the lead. This naturally gave Huang Qi a sense of belonging. Back in Black Wind Cave, he was the lowest-ranked flagmaster and was constantly bullied and humiliated. But now, with Lin Jin, he found his strength and the status he deserved. Huang Qi didn't think it was that bad to be under this powerful man. What would Black Wind Cave do next? This was what Lin Jin needed to figure out. Would the other party go all out? If that was the case, he might as well make the first move. However, After Huang Qi's analysis, he suggested Lin Jin wait a little longer. According to the rules of Black Wind Cave, if a flag master fails to return on time, they will send people out to search for him. This matter shouldn't be reported to the cave master. So next time, it's highly likely that some flag masters will come out to search. However, there might be more of them. Huang Qi had already begun to get into his role. This was good. Lin Jin needed someone like Huang Qi who could adapt to circumstances. Chapter 573. At this time, the Wind Flag Master suddenly said, "The cave master is cultivating in seclusion. Today, the one on duty in the cave is the Fierce Wind Flag Master, one of the 3 Flag Masters. With the Fierce Wind Flag Master's temperament, it will most likely come in person." Lin Jin glanced at the Wind Flag owner, and the latter responded with a flirtatious wink. It was obvious that the Wind Flag Master was an expert when it came to adapting to circumstances. From the beginning until now, he had been very cooperative and could be considered the one who had suffered the least. Lin Jin wasn't naive enough to think that it would simply submit to him. If it wasn't for the monster sealing pill, the situation would have been different. But this was fine too. Lin Jin wanted this type of submission. Because in the future, with a monster's cultivation method, using both carrots and sticks, Lin Jin believed that they wouldn't leave even if he chased them away. This was Lin Jin's first attempt, and by the looks of it, the results were pretty good. "Is the Hurricane Flag owner very strong?" Lin Jin suddenly asked. Huang Qi immediately answered, "That's one of the 3 flag leaders of Black Wind Cave. He's the cave master's most capable right-hand man, so, of course, he has a high cultivation level and strength." Lin Jin nodded. "All right. Next time, the 4 of you will help me too. This will show me how loyal you are." At this moment, the 4 flag masters were all perturbed. This move had caught them off guard. If they were to attack now, it would be difficult to turn back. But did they have a choice? This time, they waited until midnight. In Liangzhou, the day was scorching hot, but the night was frighteningly cold. Without shelter and firewood to keep warm, an ordinary person would most likely freeze to death if they spent the night in the wild. This was the cruelty of Liangzhou. The chief owner and the others didn't leave. They came here to light a fire and cook. Of course, there wasn't much to eat, just some game. They were lucky. After killing a deer 2 days ago, they still had some leftovers, so they roasted it and ate it. Lin Jin even took some time to check out the hiding place of the Ox Village villagers and made a surprising discovery. Looking at the diamond entrance and the complicated carvings below, Lin Jin's eyebrows twitched. If he wasn't mistaken, there was a ruin down there. It could be a tomb or an ancient cultivator's abode. In Lin Jin's opinion, it was more likely that this was a cave abode. Upon further inspection, Lin Jin's guess was confirmed. This was indeed an ancient cultivator's cave abode, and it was from a long time ago. Who would have thought that the whole the Ox Village people were hiding in was actually a place like this? However, Lin Jin was curious. Usually, a cultivator's cave abode would have some sort of restriction. It wouldn't be surprising if there was a killing array here, but there was none here. Out of curiosity, Lin Jin stepped inside as well. Only then did he realize what was going on. The cultivator who built this cave was a good person. From below, Lin Jin could see everything clearly. The place where Ox Village was located was a spacious stone chamber that could accommodate up to 100 people. There were no restrictions here, and it seemed like it was built specifically for shelter. Elsewhere, there were illusions. To an average person, it might just be a wall, but to Lin Jin, it was an entrance that could lead him to the core of this cave abode. The Liangzhou was a dangerous place. The person who built the abode of a mortal's cave made it a place of refuge out of kindness. At the same time, he was very confident in his own magic. Lin Jin walked over to what looked like a wall to others and stood still to study it. Their boss and the others were confused, but they didn't dare to disturb Lin Jin. Lin Jin reached over. He planned to break this restriction and see if he could go deeper into the cave. But soon, Lin Jin's hand was blocked. Stunned, Lin Jin immediately conjured a ball of flame on his hand. He tried again, but it was blocked again. Amazing! Lin Jin's expression changed. He had borrowed Xiao Hua's strength earlier, and even the rank 5 Firewolf's flames were repelled. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that this restriction was amazing. I don't believe this. Lin Jin immediately invoked the strength of his second blood contract pet beast. In an instant, the flames on his hand were dyed crimson. Open for me. Lin Jin formed his palm into a claw and reached forward, but he was still forced back. Lin Jin was stunned for a moment before he turned around. Lin Jin clearly knew that this cave abode's owner had such a high cultivation level that even Lin Jin couldn't break the restriction he left behind at full strength. He had no choice but to think about it later. However, this made Lin Jin think of something else. If even 2 of his rank 5 pet beasts couldn't break the restriction, one could only imagine how powerful this place was. The cultivator who laid this restriction was no ordinary cultivator either. If even Lin Jin couldn't break it, it meant that no one else could either. If there was something inside this cave abode, no one else had taken it yet. This was good news. The reason why Ox Village was able to form an oasis and nurture a village was probably related to this cultivator's cave abode. This unexpected discovery delighted Lin Jin. But since he couldn't get in, Lin Jin decided to stop thinking about it. Right now, it was more important to figure out how to subdue the monsters in Blackwind Cave. Just then, Huang Qi came over respectfully and bowed at Lin Jin. I've received news from the Yin Wind that the Cyclone flag owner is here with 15 other flag owners. They'll be here in half a cup of tea's time. Lin Jin's eyes lit up and he nodded. The Yin Wind flag owner, also known as the Snake Monster, was the second to express its loyalty to Lin Jin. Furthermore, it had even recommended itself and was willing to report to the Blackwind Cave on its own accord, luring the other flag masters over. Truth be told, most people wouldn't dare to agree to this. Who knew what this Yin Wind flag owner was thinking? It was possible that this was just an excuse to warn the other flag owners once they got back, so that they could launch a full-scale attack and eliminate the enemy. But Lin Jin wasn't afraid. After his previous 2 encounters, he had a rough idea of how strong the monsters in Blackwind Cave were. To be honest, although it was not bad, it was still a far cry from his current state. The strongest of the 72 flag beasts was only a rank 4 demonic beast. Based on this strength, the Blackwind Cave Master was at most a rank 5 demonic beast. It wasn't that Lin Jin was boasting, but even if all the monsters in Blackwind Cave came out and surrounded him, Lin Jin wouldn't be afraid. The only problem was that he might have to fight to the death. Lin Jin didn't think that was necessary. Wouldn't it be better to take them down one by one? Hence, when the Yin Wind Flag Master recommended himself, Lin Jin accepted the invitation. In other words, whether the Yin Wind Flag Master really wanted to prove his loyalty or put on an act to deceive Lin Jin wasn't afraid. There were only 2 possible outcomes. One was a reward, and the other was a punishment. It all depended on the Yin Wind Flag owner's choice. Although the monsters in Blackwind Cave were weaker and their cultivation levels were lacking, Lin Jin wasn't afraid. With so many monsters around, Lin Jin could teach them energy cultivation and demonic arts. Even if not every one of them could reach Shang'er's level of cultivation, as long as they could get close, they would still be a force that could make their enemies tremble in fear with their numbers. Chapter 574. Furthermore, if they were lucky, 1 or 2 of these demonic beasts would have outstanding aptitudes and could reach Shang'er's current level. That would be a huge gain. At that time, this group of demon beasts alone will be able to deal with powerful beings like the Corpse Dao. Just like the big brothers in the underworld, how would they evaluate their strength? Of course, it depended on who had more underlings. Many ants could bite an elephant to death. This was not just a saying. If not for this, Lin Jin would never have dared to impart skills to monsters. But with this item, the monster's life and death could be decided with a single thought, so he didn't have to worry about anything anymore. After summoning Shui Feng and Hua Feng, Lin Jin scanned the 3 monsters. I have a few poison pills here. Take them and pretend to run away to report back. Then, crush the poison pills among the monsters. Remember, this is a test of your loyalty. If you don't obey or harbor other intentions, Don't blame me for being merciless. Lin Jin's expression darkened as he threatened them menacingly. Furthermore, after experiencing the torment of the monster sealing pill, even the most unyielding of them all, the bloody wind flagmaster, revealed fear in its eyes. Although there was still a trace of unwillingness, just the thought of having to experience the torment of the monster sealing pill again was enough to make one break out in a cold sweat. Therefore, even if they were forced, they only had one choice. Now that he was in Lin Jin's hands, he couldn't die even if he wanted to. Right, Huang Qi, since you're so loyal, I'll give you a strength pill. Once you consume it, your strength will multiply. Lin Jin flicked his finger, giving Huang Qi some benefits. The latter was filled with gratitude and excitement. It was like a primary school student who had received a reward from his class teacher. He actually felt a sense of superiority and pride. Huang Qi also gave face and knelt down to express his gratitude. Everything proceeded according to Lin Jin's direction. Go. You've done well. You'll all be rewarded. After saying that, Lin Jin glanced at Huang Qi and said, next time, I can perfect your shape-shifting technique. You won't have to come out with this half-human, half-beast appearance to scare people. When Huang Qi heard this, his entire body trembled. The art of shape-shifting was its shortcoming. There was no doubt that it wanted to perfect it even in its dreams. However, the competition in the Black Wind Cave was also intense. Don't be fooled by the fact that they usually called each other brothers and seemed to have a very good relationship. In reality, they were all wary of competing with each other, and no one was there to guide it. Now that Lin Jin had perfected Huang Qi's transformation, which was equivalent to fulfilling Huang Qi's long-cherished wish, Huang Qi was naturally grateful and became even more loyal to Lin Jin. Lin Jin waved his hand, and the three monsters immediately retreated. As they ran out of the Ox village, the three demons all had their own thoughts and did not make sound. Huang Qi was now determined to follow Lin Jin wholeheartedly. Hence, he had been watching the other two monsters, the Scarlet Wind Flag and Firewind Flag, struggle internally. At this moment, the Firewind Flag Master could not help but ask, are we really going to become that person's slaves? It could be seen that it was still somewhat unconvinced and unwilling. The Fiery Wind Flag Master wanted to say something, but hesitated. In the end, he did not say anything. On the other side, Huang Qi said coldly, why do you have to make it sound so bad? Could it be that you have another choice? Yes, do you have a choice? Huang Qi felt that a wise man submits to circumstances. Since he had no other choice, why make things difficult for himself? Moreover, you won't be able to live a carefree life in Black Wind Cave. You won't even have to rely on others. Other than the title of Flag Master, you won't be able to reap any benefits. If you're not careful, you might even be challenged by the lesser monsters and have your position taken away. Huang Qi said sincerely. These were his words of advice, but they were also his true thoughts. Indeed, just as he said, Black Wind Cave was a place where only the fittest survived. It was a brutal and bloody place. The position of Flag Master wasn't fixed. If someone wanted to replace him, they could issue a challenge, and the loser would either die or be injured. Truth be told, Huang Qi was always on tenterhooks in Black Wind Cave, afraid that some lesser monster would suddenly rise up and replace him. Meanwhile, Huang Qi saw a glimmer of hope on Lin Jin's side. He obviously wanted to hold on to it. At Huang Qi's words, the Firewind Flag Master fell silent. The pain from the Yao sealing pill was still fresh in its memory. It was also extremely fearful of the mysterious expert's strength. Although it was unwilling, it didn't dare to go back and tell him the secret. After that, the three Yao did not say anything. Huang Qi had already steeled his heart. He was focused on his bright future. As for the other two Banner Masters, the Bloody Wind Banner Master did not say anything. No one knew what it was thinking. The Fire Wind Banner Master's eyes were filled with struggle and hesitation. Just then, a gust of wind came from the front. A dozen monster cultivators were rushing over. The one leading them was none other than the Een Wind Flagmaster. And behind the Een Wind Flagmaster, there was a muscular man who was over 8 feet tall. This muscular man's upper body was bare, and his muscles were knotted, and his waist was round. It was the Hurricane Flagmaster. When the Hurricane Flagmaster saw the three monsters, his eyes lit up, and he went up to them. "Bloody Wind, what's going on?" Wind said you guys were captured. It took her a lot of effort to escape and report the situation. "How did you guys escape?" Hurricane Flagmaster's voice boomed like thunder. "There were many tiger demons in Blackwind Cave. The Bloody Wind Flagmaster was one of them, and so was the Hurricane Flagmaster. In terms of strength, the Hurricane Flagmaster was definitely one of the top 3 in Blackwind Cave. He was also very considerate of the other tiger demons in the cave, behaving like a big brother. When Bloody Wind, who had been silent the entire time, saw the Hurricane Flagmaster, he immediately shouted, "Brother Hurricane, run." Oh no! Huang Chi and the Wind Flagmaster's hearts skipped a beat. In the next instant, both of them took out a poison pill and crushed it without hesitation. In an instant, a cloud of poisonous mist gushed out. In the blink of an eye, it spread over 100 feet, shrouding the monsters within. The Bloody Wind Flagmaster held its breath, thinking that it would be fine. However, the poisonous mist was too overbearing. After running 2 steps, it felt the world spinning around it, and it collapsed to the ground. The other monsters suffered the same fate. Only the Hurricane Flagmaster, who had the strongest physique, struggled for a while before running out of the poisonous mist range. However, it had inhaled quite a bit of the poisonous mist earlier. After running for less than 100 feet, its body went limp and it collapsed to the ground. Huang Chi and Wind were among those who collapsed to the ground. After all, Lin Jin didn't give them the antidote, so even if he crushed the poison pill, they wouldn't be spared. There were currently dozens of monsters lying on the ground. Some of them were unconscious, while a few with higher cultivation levels could still maintain consciousness. However, it was impossible for them to stand up. Soon, Lin Jin rushed over. Throughout the entire process, he had been observing from a hidden spot. He could clearly see who was loyal and who was up to no good. Once he arrived, Lin Jin swept away the poisonous mist with a wave of his sleeve. Admittedly, the poison pills produced by the Museum of Deadly Beasts feed mill were impressive. Even a peak rank 4 monster couldn't resist them. Also, because he had crushed 2 pills at once, the poison was multiplied. But no doubt, these poison pills were good stuff that could decide the outcome of a battle at a crucial moment. Chapter 575. Looking at the monsters on the ground, Lin Jin flicked his needles and saved Huang Chi and the Wind banner's owner. Judging from the earlier test, these two had indeed sided with him. Although this didn't prove that they wouldn't betray him in the future, they should at least be rewarded for now. Lin Jin's needles could instantly purge the poison from their bodies. After getting up, the 2 monsters quickly bowed and recounted what happened earlier. Lin Jin nodded. He had seen it too. The Bloody Wind banner's owner had obviously set a bad example, so he had to be punished. However, the Bloody Wind banner's owner seemed to have a good personality. Judging from his actions earlier, this monster was a loyal friend. Still, he had to be punished for his wrongdoings. Taking out the monster's sealing pill, Lin Jin fed one to each monster on the ground. When it came to the Bloody Wind banner's owner, Lin Jin was stunned, then overjoyed. He had picked up a treasure. This fierce Gale Flagmaster was actually a great demon that cultivated from a rare beast. Although he was only at the peak of the 4th rank, his true strength was already comparable to the 5th rank. That was because the fierce Gale Flagmaster's true form was a heaven-soaring tiger. Tigers were ferocious to begin with, and after the soaring sky tiger bloodline was awakened, it could even fly at will and control the winds. It was a pity that it had no one to guide it and had been cultivating on its own. Otherwise, forget using poison pills. Even if Lin Jin were to fight it himself, he would still lose. Lin Jin's face was filled with excitement. Now that he had fed the Bloody Wind banner's owner the monster sealing pill, he would be able to control the monster's life and death. Lin Jin was eager to see how far this monster could go under his guidance. It would probably be even stronger than Shonger. Due to the Flag of Cyclones incident, Lin Jin was even more excited. He thought his plan was a great one. It wasn't easy to encounter rare beasts in this world, and it was even rarer to meet one that was talented in cultivation. While Lin Jin had many cultivation methods for monsters, he had only taught Shanger, Little Five, and White Ape. Although they were all talented, Lin Jin still didn't think it was enough. If this plan was successful, he would be able to use the Beast Sealing Pill to control many demonic beasts and teach them orthodox cultivation techniques. Not only would he be able to cultivate a group of incomparably tyrannical combat strength, but he would also be able to cultivate a few top-level demonic beasts. Lin Jin had fed all the monsters the Monster Sealing Pill. Now, their lives were in Lin Jin's hands. As for whether the creature could break free from the Monster Sealing Pill's control, Lin Jin wasn't worried. The Monster Sealing Pill was a unique pill refined by the museum's feed mill. According to the museum's description, unless Lin Jin helped them break free, no matter how high the monster's rank was, it would never be able to break free from a Monster Sealing Pill's control. With this, Lin Jin could use it with confidence. Looking around, the number of demonic beasts they controlled this time was more than 20. In addition to Huang Qi and the other 3, the total number of demonic beasts they controlled was close to 30. This was already quite a sizable force. Of course, Lin Jin knew that things could happen once or twice, but there wouldn't be a third or fourth time. This time, Blackwind Cave wouldn't be so thick-skinned as to send a small group of monsters to investigate. The next time they came, it would probably be the Blackwind Cave Master leading the remaining 72 banner leaders and the lesser monsters. Although Lin Jin wasn't afraid, there was a more energy-efficient method. Why bother with fighting and killing? Moreover, in Lin Jin's eyes, these monsters had become his personal property. If any of them were to die, he would be the one to suffer the loss. Hence, what Lin Jin had to do next was to take the initiative. Just like how he dealt with the Fierce Gale Flag Masters group of demonic beasts, he sent Huang Qi and Yin Feng back, and then directly used the poison pill in the Blackwind Cave. In this way, he could subdue this nest of demonic beasts without fighting. Huang Qi and Yin Feng had done a great job this time. Lin Jin now trusted them. The Hurricane Flag Master and the other monsters would leave them alone for now and lock them up in Ox Village. The matter of going to Blackwind Cave couldn't be delayed any longer. Otherwise, the other party would grow suspicious. Summoning Huang Qi and Yin Feng, Lin Jin explained his plan to them. The two monsters nodded in agreement at once. Now that they were on the ship, they couldn't even get off. They could only continue down this path and do whatever Lin Jin told them to. You two aren't bad. Work hard, and once this is done, you'll be handsomely rewarded. Lin Jin wasn't joking. If he said there was going to be a reward, there would definitely be one. After the two monsters accepted his orders and left, Lin Jin invoked a spell to immobilize Hurricane Flag Master and the other captives with a Monster Sealing Pill. Then, he followed Huang Qi and Yin Feng to Blackwind Cave. Blackwind Cave was a well-known place within a radius of several hundred miles. With the decline of humanity in Liangzhou and monsters running amok, Blackwind Cave was definitely one of the top 3 monster factions. It could be said that other than the overlord of Liangzhou, Water God Cult, Blackwind Cave had never been afraid of anyone, and no one dared to provoke them. But this time, something had clearly happened. First, the Yellow Wind Flag Master who went out to collect offerings didn't return. Then, the 3 Flag Masters, Shui Feng, Hu Feng, and Yin Feng, who went to look for him, never returned. Something must have happened. Although Blackwind Cave was a place for monsters, there were many rules. Those who went out for business had to return within an hour. Later on, the Hurricane Flag Master, who was temporarily in charge of the cave's affairs, personally led a team out to search. Only then did the monsters in the cave relax. The Hurricane Flag Master was trustworthy when it came to handling matters. After all, he was the cave master's right-hand man. Not only was he strong, but he was also resourceful and loyal. To make a name for himself in Blackwind Cave, strength alone wasn't enough. He had to maintain a good relationship with all parties and be valued by the cave master. All 3 were indispensable. Hence, for the Hurricane Flag Master to be able to become the cave's manager, he was definitely no ordinary person. There shouldn't be any problems if he personally went out. The other flag masters in the cave shared the same thought. With that, they went on with whatever they had to do without worry. But after waiting for more than 2 hours, the Hurricane Flag Master still hadn't returned with his men. By now, some of the monster cultivators had noticed something was wrong. But because it had only been a short while, they didn't do anything. At this time, Huang Qi and the 2 Yin Wind demons returned to the Black Wind Cave. Admittedly, Lin Jin had thought things through. If he had hesitated any longer, the monsters in Black Wind Cave would have grown suspicious and put their guards up. And now, Huang Qi and Yin Feng had returned at the right time. This is bad, this is bad. Huang Qi was also a drama queen. It stopped for a moment at the entrance of the cave to prepare its expression. Then, it looked at the Yin Wind and nodded. Only then did it show a panicked expression and rushed into the Black Wind Cave. The flag masters in charge of guarding the cave entrance hurried over to greet them. What happened? Quick, report to the cave master. The Hurricane Flag Master and the others have been captured. The 2 of us fought our way out, and only then were we able to escape and report the news, Huang Qi shouted. Chapter 576. Because of the huge commotion, it also alarmed some of the demon cultivators in the depths of the Black Wind Cave. The Yin Wind Flag Master also chimed in. The 2's acting was not perfect, and there were still many flaws, but not everyone could calmly see through them. Especially since the Fierce Wind Flag Master had a special status, he would definitely report this to the Cave Master. In an instant, many demon cultivators in the Black Wind Cave came out from their hiding places, and there were already many layers of people surrounding them. Quiet. At this time, a calm voice was heard. The demons looked and hurriedly lowered their heads and quietened down. This demon cultivator was rather refined, just like a human scholar. He actually had the aura of a scholar. Greetings, Cool Wind Flag Master. Many demon cultivators bowed in a nondescript manner. Usually, demon cultivators would not have so much etiquette when meeting each other, but it was different when meeting the Cool Wind Flag Master. It was said that the Cool Wind Flag Master had once comprehended Tao in a human academy in his early years, and he was very respectful of human etiquette. In addition, the Cool Wind Flag Master status was higher than the Fierce Wind Flag Masters, and even the Cave Master was polite to him. Therefore, no demon dared to oppose the Cool Wind Flag Master's promotion of human etiquette. In addition, bowing when meeting the Cool Wind Flag Master was a rule that all the demons in the Black Wind Cave knew. What exactly happened? Tell me. The Cool Wind Flag Master was extremely calm, and his eyes were half closed. Clearly, he was calm and intelligent. Seeing the Clear Wind Flag Master, the hearts of Huang Qi and Yin Feng, who were acting, trembled. In the Black Wind Cave, the Cave Master's cultivation and strength were naturally the strongest. But in terms of intelligence, the Cool Wind Flag Master was definitely the most intelligent. They ran back to be spies, not afraid of others, but afraid of meeting the Cool Wind Flag Master. This was because the Cool Wind Flag Master would definitely ask in detail, and sometimes the flaws were exposed in this kind of question and answer. What was the scariest thing for a spy? It was to fail and be discovered. Therefore, Huang Qi and Yin Feng looked at each other and already had a plan and a decision. Right now, they were in the direction of the cave entrance, which was considered an air inlet. If they released the poison pill here, it would only take a moment for the poison gas to fill the entire Black Wind Cave. Now was the opportunity. The 2 monsters knew that there was no turning back. Therefore, without hesitation, they crushed the poison pills in their hands. The 2 subtle sounds made the Clear Wind Flag Master wary. However, no matter how smart the Clear Wind Flag Master was, he couldn't react in time. In the blink of an eye, the poison mist had already spread out dozens of feet. At this moment, the Black Wind Cave was filled with demonic beasts. Almost half of them were shrouded by the poisonous mist. Those with slow reactions and low cultivation didn't even understand what was going on before they felt the world spin around them and fell to the ground. Those with faster reflexes and higher cultivations reacted immediately. However, The poison pills produced by the feed workshop were too overbearing. Just a little bit of it was enough to bring down the demonic beasts. Therefore, in just a short while, a large area of the cave entrance had already collapsed. There were some demonic beasts inside that were not affected due to the distance, but they immediately retreated in fear, avoiding the poisonous gas's range. However, Huang Qi and Yin Feng had chosen an air inlet, so the poisonous gas began to quickly spread into the Black Wind Cave. This time, there was another round of chaos. What happened? I can't move. My whole body feels weak. Damn it, it's Huang Feng and Yin Feng. They plotted against us. Shouts, screams, and curses could be heard incessantly. However, none of these could stop the spread of the poisonous gas. Some of the stronger demonic cultivators wanted to cast spells to stir up a gale to blow the poisonous gas away. However, the poisonous gas came too suddenly. Before these demonic beasts could cast their spells, they were already poisoned. Then, they lost all their strength and collapsed to the ground. Moreover, Huang Qi and Yin Feng Flagmaster, who had taken the antidote in advance, had quickly retreated to the outside of the cave. Then, they used spells to blow the wind together to speed up the spread of the poisonous gas in the Black Wind Cave. The roars and curses in the Black Wind Cave turned from strong to weak, and finally, there was silence. It's done. Outside the cave, Huang Qi's face was full of excitement and nervousness. After all, for him, this was definitely a challenging job. After all, if he failed, he could imagine the consequences even with his toes. Next to him, Yin Feng Flagmaster also had an excited expression, but he was relatively calmer than Huang Qi. It's too early to be happy. Yin Feng Flagmaster stared at the entrance of the cave with a vigilant expression. At this moment, there was a sudden strange sound in the cave. Then, a strange wind swept out in the opposite direction, and actually swept out all the poisonous gas that had entered the Black Wind Cave. When the poisonous gas flew out, it was like a black dragon coming out of the sea. It was quite spectacular. However, in the eyes of Huang Qi and Yin Feng Flagmaster, this was not a good thing. Oh no! Huang Qi was so scared that he took a step back. He was the weakest among the 72 flag masters, and his cultivation was the lowest. At this moment, seeing the plan change, of course, he was extremely frightened. However, he also knew that even if the poisonous gas was blown out, the demonic beast that had already breathed in the poisonous gas and fallen to the ground would not be able to stand up in a short period of time, let alone fight. Yin Feng Flagmaster, Yellow Wind Flagmaster, you two are so bold. You actually dare to betray and plot against us. From inside the Black Wind Cave came the angry roar of the Cool Wind Flagmaster. Then, a few figures flew out. It was the Cool Wind Flagmaster and a few other Flagmasters who had not breathed in the poisonous gas. This time, Huang Qi and Yin Feng Flagmaster were both shocked. They mused, what's wrong with this Cool Wind Flagmaster? Why hasn't he fallen to the ground? Regardless of the reason, the current situation was no longer something that Huang Qi and the Yin Feng Flagmaster could handle. Fortunately, Lin Jin appeared at that moment. As the mastermind behind this plan, he would obviously follow along to ensure that it went smoothly. Speaking of which, Huang Qi and Yin Feng Flag had done a great job, so this situation obviously had nothing to do with them. After all, while the poison pill was powerful, it wasn't perfect. There would always be some drawbacks. Also, they couldn't rule out the possibility that the monster might not be afraid of the poisonous gas due to some innate reason. Obviously, this Cool Wind Flagmaster was one of them. Looking at the Cool Wind Flagmaster, Lin Jin had a rough idea of the man's true form. He was quite surprised. However, Lin Jin was now a knowledgeable man who had seen all kinds of strange creatures, so he was only slightly surprised. You two did a good job, Lin Jin said to Huang Qi and Yin Feng Flag. Lin Jin said to Huang Qi, beast taming was a skill, and to be fair, both of them did a great job. Otherwise, it wouldn't just be these few monsters rushing out of Black Wind Cave, but over 100 of them. This meant that they had accomplished their goal. It was normal for some monsters in the Black Wind Cave to be unafraid of the poison pill. The poison pill was effective on living beings with flesh and blood, such as humans and monsters. However, it wouldn't work on monsters. For example, a painting spirit like Little Book Building was neither a human nor a beast. Poison gas couldn't harm a painting. The same principle applied to other monsters. In other words, for the cool wind flag master to be able to remain unscathed in the poisonous gas and even blow it out of the cave, it could only mean that this cool wind flag master was some kind of monster. As for what kind of monster it was, Lin Jin already had an inkling. Chapter 577. While the man seemed elegant and graceful, he had a sharp aura about him, like a sheathed sword, humble and gentle when sheathed, unsheathed once unsheathed. Its sharpness was unstoppable. In other words, the flagmaster's true form was probably some sort of sword. He was a gremlin, just like Xiao Shu Lu gremlins were rare, especially ones who had cultivated to this level. Lin Jin was naturally curious. However, since it was a spiritual monster, it would be difficult for normal beast pressure to be effective against it. Fortunately, the people behind the flag master were monsters. Fortunately, they weren't affected by the poisonous gas. Lin Jin planned to end this quickly. After all, the Black Wind Cave's master hadn't shown up yet. Based on Lin Jin's estimation, the man was quite powerful, or else he wouldn't have been able to command these 72 flag masters. At this, Lin Jin swept a glance at the flag master and the others before saying, "I am Curator's disciple, Lin Jin. Today, I'm here on my master's orders to subdue the monsters and gremlins of Blackwind Cave. Join Curator's door and you will receive cultivation methods, embarking on the path of cultivation. Do not resist and obey the will of heaven." What Lin Jin said was complete nonsense. However, there were times when one had to put on an act. Moreover, Lin Jin wasn't wrong. He had already planned to unify the monsters in Blackwind Cave and control them with a monster sealing pill. He was going to teach them the proper cultivation method and even establish a monster sect. When that time came, Lin Jin planned to use Curator's identity as his evangelist. This way, Curator could become the sect's leader and gain even more prestige. Of course, the momentum was just a facade. The most important thing was that this was a group of real demonic cultivators. Moreover, after the signboard was erected, it would naturally attract all the demonic cultivators in the world. At that time, it would truly be a grand event. This was in line with Lin Jin's philosophy. The flag master wore a stern expression, but he could tell that Lin Jin wasn't an average person, so he wouldn't attack recklessly. Instead, the monsters behind the flag master started cursing in disdain. Lin Jin swept his gaze across them, and an intimidating aura swept over them. The few Yao cultivators were immediately affected. 2 of them were pinned to the ground by an invisible force, unable to get up. A few of them were barely hanging on. Although they wouldn't fall to the ground, it was impossible for them to fight. Only one of them had a high cultivation base and was able to resist the pressure of the ferocious beast. However, his eyes were filled with fear. "Clear Wind Flag Master, be careful. This person is not simple," the beast cultivator warned with a solemn expression. At the same time, the Cool Breeze Flag Master also made his move. At this moment, it was as if a treasured sword had been unsheathed. "Good sword." Lin Jin's eyes lit up and he quickly dodged. At the same time, a gash several feet long was carved into the spot where he had been standing. After dodging the attack, Lin Jin looked up and mumbled, "Sword energy coming from above. What kind of spell is this?" As knowledgeable as he was, Lin Jin couldn't tell what the flagmaster was up to. Then, a few more blade energies came slashing at him. This time, Lin Jin didn't try to dodge. He wanted to defeat his opponent and subdue him. In this case, dodging was completely useless, especially when it came to a treasured sword. The biggest blow was to prove that he could block its sharpness. Activating the 5 elements armor, Lin Jin expanded the armor by 3 feet. Then, he walked toward the Cool Breeze Flagmaster. Courting death, the Flagmaster was enraged. Using his hand as a sword, he swung it at Lin Jin. The next instant, a sharp blade energy descended from the sky and slashed at Lin Jin's 5 elements armor. Crack! Crack! The 5 elemental armor let out a cracking sound, but that was all. The 5 elemental armor Lin Jin was cultivating was considered one of the strongest defensive spells in the Daelord's Heavenly Scroll. Lin Jin had spent several months studying and perfecting it, so even if he had just reached the next level, it was impossible for the Breeze flag to break it. The flag master's expression changed at this. His confidence had clearly suffered a blow. He had always thought of himself as the #1 killer. Even the Black Wind Cave Master couldn't compare to him in this regard. This had also nurtured the Flag Master's arrogant personality. At least in terms of blade energy, he was confident that he was invincible. But today, he had met a tough opponent who could withstand his blade energy. The Flag Master's eyes turned menacing. This time, he thrust his sword forward. With a point of his finger, an invisible blade energy shot out. Even the sharpness of its surroundings tore through the air as it rushed toward Lin Jin. This time, the 5 elemental armor was almost pierced through. But in the end, the 5 elemental armor was more skillful. Or rather, after Lin Jin withstood Flag Master's relentless attacks twice, the 5 elemental armor began to retaliate. With a flick of his finger, silver needles shot out, disrupting the Flag Master's spell casting. Almost at the same time, clouds gathered beneath Lin Jin's feet. Like a swallow, he appeared before the Flag Master in the blink of an eye. The Flag Master was startled. Before he could react, Lin Jin threw a punch at him. He was using another spell he learned from the Heavenly Tomes, Sky Scorching Palm. This palm landed squarely on the Flag Master's body, causing flames to erupt and the Flag Master to wail in pain. The next instant, Lin Jin used his palm as a claw and grabbed onto something. In an instant, the Flag Master's figure disappeared. After a loud explosion and the flames, the Flag Master was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a sword appeared in Lin Jin's hand. The sword was about 4 feet long. The scabbard was black with a brass buckle, the hilt was blue, and the tip and tail were decorated with brass. Lin Jin reached out and forcefully shoved the reluctant sword back into its scabbard. Behave yourself. In order to subdue the sword, not only did Lin Jin unleash his full strength, he even opened the visitation hall's door and borrowed the museum's power to suppress the sword. Now, the sword was completely subdued. Perhaps it was intimidated by Lin Jin's power, or perhaps it was forced to do so, but in the end, it could only submit. This process wasn't peaceful at all. When the Clearwind Demon's sword resisted, an ear-piercing sword cry could be heard as sword chi surged forth. However, in the end, the Clearwind Demon's sword was still forcefully suppressed. When it was completely subdued, the Clearwind Demon's sword also became obedient. Lin Jin breathed a sigh of relief. Although it took some effort, the result was good. He tied the sword to his waist, using it as his personal weapon. Seeing how Lin Jin easily subdued the Flag Master, the remaining monsters kept quiet out of fear. Although they were arrogant and hot-tempered, they weren't fools. Even the Flag Master, who was ranked second only to the Black Wind Cave Master, was easily subdued. Even if they were to risk their lives, it would be no different from sending them to their deaths. Hence, silence was their only option. However, to Lin Jin, silence wasn't enough. He wanted them to submit. He flicked his finger. A few demon-sealing pills flew out, and the Flag Masters hurriedly caught them. Eat them and obey my order from now on. If you don't, you'll be killed immediately. Lin Jin could sense a domineering aura breaking out of Black Wind Cave, so his tone left no room for negotiation. Chapter 578. Needless to say, that powerful aura belonged to the Black Wind Cave Master. Based on his aura alone, the man was a true rank 5. Even Lin Jin had to treat him seriously. Hence, at a crucial moment like this, he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Forced by Lin Jin's intimidating aura, some of the flag bearers pondered for a moment before swallowing the monster-sealing pill. Some of them looked conflicted and hesitant. Perhaps sensing the Black Wind Cave Master's aura, they looked excited and wanted to stall for time. But Lin Jin wasn't about to give them the chance. Indeed, he was rather lenient towards most demon cultivators, but it wasn't that he didn't care about the situation. Just like now. Since Lin Jin had spoken and the other party refused to listen, they had no choice but to face the consequences. Lin Jin showed no mercy to the monsters who refused to swallow the pill. Just like he said, if they ate the pill, everything would be fine. If they didn't, he would kill them on the spot. Lin Jin attacked. The lightning fire needle in his hand shot out like a bolt of lightning. Before a demonic beast could react, the lightning fire needle pierced through its head, causing it to bleed profusely and die. For real, Lin Jin wouldn't hesitate. These monsters were only rank 4. When they saw Lin Jin taking action, they scattered in all directions. Some of them ran back into Black Wind Cave, screaming for their cave master to save them. Lin Jin immediately released Xiaohua. With a two-pronged attack, it only took a few breaths for the defiant monsters to be slaughtered. After all, they were still a far cry from the rank 5 Firewolf beast. Seeing the terrifying rank 5 Firewolf, the beast that chose to swallow the demon-sealing pill, all rejoiced. Now that the small threat had been dealt with, Lin Jin was now waiting for Black Wind Cave's master to come out. Depending on the situation, he would subdue it if he could, but if he couldn't, Lin Jin would just eliminate it. At this time, the ground began to shake, especially the Black Wind Tunnel. The Black Wind Cave master is coming out. Huang Qi mustered up his courage and reminded him from behind. It wasn't just Huang Qi. Even the Yin Wind Division's leader wore a fearful expression. Even the breezy, bewitching sword that Lin Jin had subdued was vibrating slightly at Lin Jin's waist. Lin Jin knew that to be able to command so many monsters in Black Wind Cave, the cave master must be someone extraordinary. But no matter what, Lin Jin had to get rid of him today. He had no choice but to do it. Even if Lin Jin was willing, Black Wind Cave probably wouldn't agree to it. Rumble. A strong gust of wind blew out of Dark Wind Cavern. Lin Jin frowned. Everything else aside, just this wind manipulation alone was a masterpiece. Just from this alone, one could tell that this Black Wind Cave master was extraordinary. This was why Lin Jin had to be on his guard. Hoo-hoo. Within the Black Wind Cave, gusts of black wind howled out, forming a whirlwind. The whirlwind gradually expanded, but the force of the wind did not diminish in the slightest. From afar, at least 100 feet of sand and stones were flying as the wind raged. At this time, a tall figure gradually appeared from the black wind. Cave Master is here. Huang Qi's voice was already extremely soft. It was obvious that it was extremely afraid of the Black Wind Cave Master. Lin Jin took a closer look as well, trying to figure out who this Black Wind Cave Master was. In the next moment, a voice came from the figure. Your methods are extraordinary, but I, the Cave Master, do not recognize you. In that case, we have no enmity between us. Even if there is, we should talk about it first. You came straight up and attacked so viciously, slaughtering the demonic cultivators in my cave and forcing them to submit. May I know the reason? The voice was deep and thick. There was no fluster or exasperation. Instead, there was restraint and rationality. This was different from the monsters Lin Jin was familiar with. Most monsters were impulsive by nature. They would start a fight at the slightest disagreement. If the other party had scolded or attacked him right away, Lin Jin would have been able to deal with them easily. But since the other party questioned him first, Lin Jin was caught off guard. After all, strictly speaking, Lin Jin was the one who started the fight. However, this wasn't a problem for Lin Jin. In Liangzhou, humanity is on the decline. Your Black Wind Cave has taken advantage of the situation to rise up, but now, you feed humans like livestock. Take Ox Village, 50 miles away, for example. Initially, there were at least 100 people in the village, but now, less than half of that number remains. You feed on one person every month, and one place spies on 100 villages. The number of innocent civilians who have died in your hands must number in the tens of thousands. As a human cultivator, how could I just sit back and watch? Lin Jin tossed out a reason. Moreover, it was a valid reason. He was enforcing justice on behalf of the heavens. This was something that could be justified no matter what. The Black Wind Cave Lord sneered before revealing himself. He was a tall man with a short beard and long hair. His facial features were resolute. Although he looked no different from a human, upon closer inspection, one could see that his face was shaped like a ferocious tiger. His eyes were also filled with anger and ferocity. What a joke! There are so many human countries in each province that eat and kill. There are more than 10 million of them. They are still living beings. Why don't you mention it? The Black Wind Cave Lord asked with a dark expression. Lin Jin didn't know how to answer this question. Humans are the spiritual leaders. That's all there is to it. Although it was only 4 words, his attitude was clear enough. The Black Wind Cave Lord was enraged. Black wind surged around his body, and his body expanded. In the blink of an eye, he became half human and half beast. He was more than 30 feet tall, and his fingers were like tiger claws. They were long and curved, incomparably sharp. His aura had exceeded Lin Jin's estimation. At least, he wasn't any weaker than Xiao Hua. He might even be stronger. Seeing that the Black Wind Cave Lord was about to make a move, Lin Jin observed him carefully. An idea came to him, and he suddenly said, Lu Shofeng, Lord Taoist said that although you're wild, you're well-mannered and respectful. You're also his favorite disciple among the 6-path beasts. But to think that you're so unbearable. You've gathered monsters to commit evil and wreak havoc in the world. Did Lord Taoist teach you this? His last few words were laced with reprimand. As if struck by lightning, the Black Wind Cave Lord who was about to pounce on Lin Jin trembled. His eyes were filled with disbelief. You, how do you know my real name? Who are you? The Black Wind Cave Lord's voice trembled as he sized up Lin Jin, trying to figure out who he was. Lin Jin mused, it's done. From a moment the Black Wind Cave Lord appeared, Lin Jin felt that he was extremely similar to Taoist who, one of the 6 paths beasts described in Lord Taoist's Heavenly Scroll. Coupled with the Black Wind Cave Lord's terrifying cultivation and aura, Lin Jin came up with this guess. He was just testing the waters with his words, but to think he was right. This Black Wind Cave Lord was actually Taoist who, with this, other than Taoist Crane, whose fate was unknown, the other 5 basically knew what was going on. Taoist Insect had died in Lin Jin's hands. Taoist Corpse and Taoist Ghost had become archenemies. Taoist Dragon had fallen, and his pet beast, the 5-clawed golden dragon, had been refined into a terrifying zombie dragon by Taoist Corpse. And now, he met Taoist Hu in Liangzhou. Admittedly, Lin Jin and that Taoist Lord were truly fated. Chapter 579. There was an introduction to the 6 paths beasts in Daolord's Divine Scroll, so Lin Jin knew that not all of them were human cultivators. There were also monsters. There were 2 monster cultivators. One was Taoist Tiger, and the other was Taoist Crane. Lin Jin was right. Of the 6 beasts Taoist Dragon had the highest cultivation level. However, Taoist Dragon was unlucky and died young. And the one Daolord liked the most was Taoist Tiger. Many people knew that Lin Jin had borrowed Daolord's Divine Scroll in Tianxin City under the name of Curator, so there was no need for him to hide it. After some thought, he told Taoist Tiger, I, Curator Sure, have borrowed Daolord's Divine Scroll before. I learned about you 6 paths beasts from Daolord's Divine Scroll, Lin Jin said. Taoist Tiger's murderous aura had receded, and he returned to his normal size as he approached Lin Jin. As the saying went, if you can make friends, don't make enemies. Taoist Tiger was the same. What followed was a long conversation. At first, they were wary of each other. After all, no one could trust the other so easily. But as they chatted, they realized they had an unexpected affinity for each other. When they were happy, they could even laugh heartily. From afar, Huang Qi and the Yin Wind Flag commander were dumbfounded. They had no idea what was going on. How did the 2 who were about to kill each other start chatting as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for years? The rebellious flag commanders stood dumbfounded by the side. But no matter what, it seemed like it was a good thing that they didn't start fighting. Lin Jin had always been a carefree person, and Taoist Tiger was even more so. They got to know each other through a fight, and their initial misunderstanding was cleared up. It turned out that Taoist Tiger really didn't gather monsters to cause trouble. He was ambushed many years ago and was severely injured. Hence, he fled to Liangzhou. This place was deserted and the environment was harsh. It was a good place to hide. Back then, Taoists who had only found a place to hide and recuperate. Who would have thought that there would be so many demon beasts gathered here? Although Taoist who was heavily injured, he wasn't someone ordinary demon beasts could handle. He easily occupied the Black Wind Cave. After that, Taoist Tiger spent most of his time in seclusion to heal his wounds and hide his aura. After a long time, the Black Wind Cave gradually grew in scale, and more demonic beasts came to join them. But then again, Taoist Tiger had never eaten humans before. Tao Monarch had already taught him the cultivation method and the method to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, so Taoist Tiger didn't need to do that. So the demonic beasts in the Black Wind Cave eating humans was something that other demonic beasts did. Of course, Taoist Tiger was aware of this, but he turned a blind eye to it. Lin Jin said with a serious expression, "Let's not talk about the past. I plan to guide the monsters of the Black Wind Cave onto the right path and teach them the way of cultivation so that they can benefit the world." Unexpectedly, Taoist Tiger nodded. To tell you the truth, this was my plan as well. Back when my master was teaching me, he told me about this grand plan, but he didn't manage to fulfill it. As for me, my old injuries have yet to heal, and I've been focused on cultivating in seclusion all these years. I've neglected this matter. Having said that, he added, since Mr. Lin's master can read the divine scrolls, you could be considered to have inherited my master's legacy. With this, you and I are of the same lineage. Today is a beautiful day, and we're having such a pleasant conversation. Why don't we become sworn brothers so we can help each other out in the future? Lin Jin was stunned. He mused, this Taoist Tiger sure is something. His social skills are miles ahead of other Taoists. Speaking of which, they did have a pleasant conversation earlier. It felt like they regretted not meeting each other earlier. Moreover, Lin Jin had told him about Taoist Corpse and Taoist Ghost, and Taoist Tiger shared a common enemy with him. Back then, I wasn't on good terms with Taoist Corpse and Taoist Ghost. Although they were humans, they were of low character. My master said the same thing back then, but he was merciful and decided to give them a chance to turn over a new leaf. I didn't expect them to become even worse after all these years. Taoist Tiger looked enraged, especially after learning that Taoist Corpse had cultivated Taoist Dragon's pet beast into a zombie dragon. Taoist Tiger flew into a rage. Among the 6 beasts, Taoist Tiger and Taoist Dragon had the best relationship. Back then, they were inseparable. Later on, Taoist Dragon mysteriously passed away due to an ominous reason. Now, it seemed like Taoist Corpse had something to do with it. Just based on this, Taoist Tiger and Taoist Dragon had a common ground. Since Taoist Tiger was so straightforward, Lin Jin didn't mince his words. So be in terms of status or strength, Taoist Tiger was top-notch. Also, after interacting with him, Lin Jin liked Taoist Tiger's personality. Taoist Tiger acted on his thoughts and spoke his mind. He was straightforward and didn't have any tricks up his sleeves. Before they knew it, the sky had turned dark as they chatted. Brother Lin, Liangzhou is a desolate place and the wind is strong at night. Come, let's continue talking inside the cave. Taoist Tiger still hadn't had enough, so he dragged Lin Jin into the cave. Huang Qi, the Yin Wind Flag Master, and the others had no choice but to follow along. It was awkward to bump into other monsters. Inside the Black Wind Cave, some of the stronger monsters who were knocked out by the poison pills were now standing up on their own. Although they were still a little dizzy, they were fine. Of course, more than half of the monsters still couldn't get up. Dragging Lin Jin inside, Taoist who quickly asked, "Brother Lin, what did you do? It's so domineering. Even I felt dizzy when I breathed in that strange poisonous gas." Lin Jin had a new plan in mind. Instead of answering immediately, he performed an acupuncture technique. With a flick of his wrist, hundreds of silver needles flew out and pierced the monsters' acupoints to detoxify them. Moments later, the monsters on the ground got up again with expressions of surprise. "It's just a small trick. It's not worth mentioning." Lin Jin chuckled dryly. Taoist Tiger didn't probe further. After giving his subordinates some instructions, he brought Lin Jin into a cave abode he had opened up himself. Lin Jin nodded profusely after taking a look inside. Taoist Tiger's cave abode wasn't bad. It was clearly augmented with a secret technique of heaven and earth. There was even a spirit gathering formation set up inside. It was obvious that this was an orthodox cultivation method. Taoist Tiger brought over some aged wine and chatted with Lin Jin. There were probably only a handful of people who could chat with Taoist Tiger, or well, maybe none at all. Hence, Taoist Tiger couldn't stop talking this time. Lin Jin didn't find it boring. Taoist Tiger's stories were interesting too. When he mentioned Taoist lore at the end, Taoist Tiger, who had drunk a few glasses of wine, started bawling. When I was a tiger cub in Nanshan, I almost lost my life in the mouth of a ferocious beast. It was Master who saved me, raised me, taught me Taoism, and helped me refine my hyoid bone and condense a human form. I didn't even have time to repay him before he left me. Heaven, why are you so heartless? Having said that, he gulped down another bowl of wine. Chapter 580. Lin Jin told him about Taoist Tiger from Taoist Lord's heavenly scroll. It was all from Taoist Lord's heart. Hearing it from Lin Jin's mouth, Taoist Tiger's eyes brimmed with tears. Lin Jin's words didn't seem fake. To put it simply, a man and a monster had gotten to know each other through a fight. After getting to know each other, they found out that they were on the same wavelength. With Taoist Lord as a medium, they also had a common enemy. The one who hurt me back then was Taoist Corpse. Taoist Tiger revealed the truth. Upon hearing this, Lin Jin realized how vicious Taoist Corpse was. Just by thinking about it, he knew that Taoist Corpse was most likely planning to refine Taoist Tiger into a zombie tiger for him to command. Fortunately, Taoist Tiger was quite capable. Even if he was ambushed, he could still severely injure his opponent and escape. Also, because he was afraid of being found by corpse cultivators, Tiger Cultivator had been extremely low-key in the past hundreds of years. Even the number of times he left the cave was pitifully few. Therefore, most people in the Liang province had heard of the Black Wind Cave Master. Tiger Cultivator, these three words had long been forgotten. Since they had become sworn brothers, Lin Jin had no plans to feed the monsters in Black Wind Cave with monster sealing pills. Firstly, it wasn't necessary. With Taoist Tiger restraining them, the monsters wouldn't dare to resist. Secondly, monster sealing pills were extremely precious. The feed mill had limited materials, so it was better to save as much as possible. Right, Brother Tiger, how much do you know about Liangzhou's water god cult? After chatting for so long, Lin Jin took a sip of wine before getting back to the topic at hand. Lin Jin was definitely going to mount 5 palms to retrieve the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. Taoist Tiger had been hiding in Black Wind Cave for centuries, so he should know a thing or two about water god cult. Sure enough, Taoist Tiger scowled in disdain at Lin Jin's question. The water god cult? Humph, just a bunch of rabble. Around the time I came to Liangzhou to hide, some mutants from the Western Prefecture came to preach, but this has nothing to do with me. Back then, their stupid cult master came to deal with me and wanted to establish his power. In the end, I bit off on his arms, and he fled in panic. Later, if it wasn't because I didn't want to cause unnecessary trouble, they would have already been destroyed. Later on, they learned their lesson and even sent me gifts so I didn't bother with them. This was Lin Jin's first time hearing about this. Clearly, with Taoist whose temperament, he would definitely not say anything. In other words, it was true. If that was the case, then the Water God sect was only SOSO. Their strength might even be inferior to the Black Wind Cave. If that was the case, things would be much easier. However, Lin Jin had always been cautious. No matter what, Water God cult had been operating in Liangzhou for hundreds of years, so they must have a solid foundation. Lin Jin wasn't afraid even when he was alone. Now that he had Black Wind Cave support, he had even less to fear. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin said, "Back then, your master, Taoist Lord, left behind an artifact at Mount 5 Palms in Liangzhou. I'm here to retrieve that artifact. Can you lend me a hand, Brother Tiger? Master's magic treasure? Taoist Tiger's eyes lit up. He hurriedly nodded. Since the items left behind by the honored master are recorded in the heavenly book, only the inheritor can take them. Brother Lin, since your honored master can read the heavenly book, he is the inheritor that my honored master mentioned. It's not a problem for you to take it. I will naturally do my best to help. Lin Jin nodded, musing that it was done. With the help of an expert like Taoist Tiger, this matter was practically in a bag. Lin Jin pondered for a moment before asking, Brother Tiger, how's your old injury? At the mention of this, Taoist Tiger's expression darkened. Don't mention it. I don't know what method that corpse Tao used to injure me back then. For the past few centuries, I've tried everything I could, but to no avail. Instead, my injury worsened and now I can barely suppress it anymore. Lin Jin nodded. In fact, when he accidentally touched Taoist Tiger earlier, he had already recorded him into the Museum of Deadly Beasts. So, Lin Jin knew Taoist Tiger's injury like the back of his hand. As the Taoist Lord disciple, Taoist Tiger knew a thing or two about beast appraising and diagnosis. But even so, he still couldn't recover after so many years. Just from this alone, one could tell how unique his injury was. However, no matter how unique it was, the museum had already provided him with a cure. Brother Tiger, if you don't mind, let me take a look at you. Lin Jin volunteered. Now that he and Taoist Tiger were allies, they could work together to deal with Corpse Tao and the Demonic Appraisal Association in the future. Hence, treating Taoist Tiger was beneficial to Lin Jin. Haha, what's there to mind? Brother Lin, feel free to take a look if you want. Taoist Tiger laughed heartily. As he spoke, he tore off his shirt, revealing his muscular upper body. On Taoist Tiger's back was a wound about 2 feet long. Strangely, this wound was difficult to heal. Although it was still stained with blood, the flesh around the wound had turned black, similar to the skin color of the zombie Lin Jin had seen. Anyone who didn't know anything about this strange wound would be at a loss for what to do, let alone treat it. But Lin Jin knew the details of this wound. It was just an ordinary wound. The reason why it couldn't heal, even after hundreds of years, was because of the corpse energy on it. And this wasn't just any corpse energy. According to the museum, this corpse energy was known as a mortal corroding corpse energy. If a regular person were to come in contact with even a hint of it, they would be instantly killed by the corpse energy and refined into a zombie. Even a powerful expert would meet a tragic end if they came in contact with it. Taoist Tiger was the disciple of the Tao Lord, one of the 6 beast men. His strength was already extraordinary hundreds of years ago, but even he had been tortured by this corpse aura for hundreds of years. Let alone dispel it, the corpse aura was about to invade his internal organs. It could be said that he was in a very dangerous situation. It wasn't that Lin Jin was boasting, but even an immortal might not be able to save Taoist Tiger. Without the Museum of Deadly Beasts, Lin Jin wouldn't be able to do anything. Forget a rank 4 beast appraiser. Even a rank 5 or 6 beast appraiser wouldn't be able to save him. Moreover, as far as Lin Jin knew, there were no rank 6 beast appraisers in this world. If there were, Lin Jin believed Xu Xiaolu was qualified to be promoted to rank 6. Returning to the wound on Taoist Tiger's back, the wound wasn't the problem. The problem was the corpse. The key was how to get rid of it. The Museum of Deadly Beasts had several methods of treatment. In Lin Jin's opinion, there were only 2 possible methods. One was to use the body refining needle to force the corpse energy out of his body. But if that was the case, the corpse energy that was forced out of his body would become a huge problem. Anyone who came in contact with it would be refined into a zombie, including himself. Even if they managed to avoid it, the corpse energy would spread and corrode the surroundings, turning the area into a land of death. If the corpse energy were to spread, it would be even more troublesome. The other method was riskier, but to Lin Jin, it would solve the problem once and for all. This method was to fight poison with poison. Normal creatures, be it humans or monsters, couldn't coexist with corpse energy, let alone suppress it. Conversely, it was more likely that they would be suppressed by the corpse energy. But what if it was a zombie who suppressed the corpse energy? This was what it meant to fight poison with poison. Coincidentally, there was a powerful zombie sealed inside Xu Xiaolu's painting. Chapter 581. Of course, this method came with a huge risk. After all, the headless zombie was so powerful that even Lin Jin and Xu Xiaolu together couldn't defeat it. They could only use the power of the demon sealing sword to seal it inside the painting world. If something were to go wrong this time, it would be a big joke. Hence, Lin Jin fell into deep thought as he pondered over the details of this plan. Either he didn't do it or he did it to perfection. He couldn't afford to make even the slightest mistake. Seeing Lin Jin in deep thought, Taoist who assumed that his injury was too troublesome for Lin Jin to handle, so he said nonchalantly, "Brother Lin, it's fine even if I can't cure it. Don't let this worry you. I've endured it for so many years, so it doesn't matter if I keep enduring it. I can handle it." Lin Jin shook his head with a smile. "Brother Tiger, you're mistaken. Your injury can be cured. I was just thinking about the details of the treatment." Taoist who was stunned at this before jumping up in shock. "Brother Lin, do you really have a way to cure it?" Lin Jin nodded. This time, Taoist who was truly excited. Others might not know, but he had been living a life worse than death for the past several hundred years. The wound on his back could not be healed no matter what he did, and the corpse aura on it was constantly corroding him. At this rate, he would die in a dozen years at most. How could Taoist who not be anxious? Hence, upon hearing that Lin Jin really had a way to cure him, Taoist who was the most excited and expectant. Lin Jin had been thinking about this for the entire night. After all, this was a serious matter, and he couldn't afford to be careless. For example, could the headless zombie suppress the immortal corroding corpse energy? If one side was defeated, the headless zombie might become stronger, or the immortal corroding corpse energy might turn around and take control of the headless zombie. Either outcome wasn't a good thing for Lin Jin. It was best if these two factors reached a balance. Of course, this was difficult, but even if there was an imbalance, Lin Jin hoped that the headless zombie could suppress the immortal corroding corpse energy because he could use the demon sealing sword to seal the headless zombie. After making up his mind, Lin Jin went to Xu Xiaolu for a discussion. However, Liangzhou was too far away from Tianxin Royal City. Even if he were to travel on a cloud, he wouldn't be able to make it in time. Fortunately, Lin Jin brought one of Xu Xiaolu's paintings with him. It was the Peach Blossom House. This was personally drawn by Xu Xiaolu, and it had already formed a boundary. With Cosmos ink, Lin Jin could teleport inside. He explained everything to Taoist who, and the latter had no objections. In one sentence, as long as he could cure his chronic illness, he would be willing to climb a mountain of blades or plunge into a sea of flames. Lin Jin took out the painting and arranged it properly. Then he used universe ink and pointed at Taoist who, the latter instantly turned into a stream of light and was sucked into the painting. Lin Jin also entered the painting world. At the same time, far away in the Tianxian Royal City, the little book pavilion sensed something and immediately stood up. "Bastard, you finally remembered me." After mumbling to himself, Xu Xiaolu smiled again. Then, he tidied up his clothes and hurriedly entered the painting world. There was also a peach blossom house in the painting realm, and it was exactly the same as the one in the academy. However, the painting realm lacked a sense of realism. Lin Jin and Taoist who had been waiting for a while now. Suddenly, the door to the Peach Blossom House was pushed open and a woman in a red dress appeared. Lin Jin quickly went up to her. Xu Xiaolu was all smiles at first, but when she saw Taoist who following behind Lin Jin, she was stunned. Then, she straightened her expression and looked at Lin Jin suspiciously. She seemed to be asking, "What's going on?" Lin Jin explained the situation and explained the situation. Xu Xiaolu's expression turned grim. The last time she and Lin Jin teamed up against that zombie, they had to give it their all and only barely managed to seal its headless body. If there was even the slightest mishap in this plan, the headless zombie might be released and there would be no end of trouble. However, Xu Xiaolu knew that Lin Jin had always been a dependable person. If he wasn't confident, he wouldn't have made this decision. After all, Lin Jin knew how terrifying the headless zombie was. After some discussion, Lin Jin and Xu Xiaolu decided to give it a try. There were many layers to the painting realm, and the one that sealed the headless zombie was the most secretive one. Only Xu Xiaolu could enter. With a wave of Xu Xiaolu's sleeve, Lin Jin and Daoist, who only saw a flash of light before they were deep within the painting realm. This place was completely different from the sunny day before. The light here was dim and dark clouds loomed overhead, making it hard to breathe. Below them, the mountains and rivers had been tainted by layers of death aura. It looked incredibly strange, as if someone had splashed a blob of ink on a painting. At the center of the darkness was a headless corpse that had been pierced through by a sword, nailed to the ground. That headless corpse looked terrifying, with a pair of eyes protruding from its breasts and its abdomen split open like a mouth. Its flesh was purplish-green in color and was incredibly tough. Isn't that the corpse? Daoist, who stared at it for a moment before exclaiming in surprise. Lin Jin was shocked. He asked for more details, and Daoist, who nodded in confirmation. There's no mistake. The corpse has an gathering talisman on it. Although it doesn't have a head, this alone is enough to confirm it. Lin Jin pondered for a moment before realization dawned on him. He got it. It was no wonder the corpse bore such a grudge against him and even brought his men to Tianxian Kingdom just to cause trouble. So it was a coincidence that Lin Jin and Xu Xiaolu managed to seal the corpse's body. This was why the corpse was so desperate. However, it was fortunate that this was the case. Otherwise, if the corpse managed to reclaim the corpse that he had been refining for centuries, he would be invincible with the help of the zombie dragon. In an instant, Lin Jin understood the cause and effect of this incident. With this, the headless zombie couldn't be released. Lin Jin was also certain that the corpse wouldn't let this matter rest. If it were Lin Jin, he would never let it go if his body was taken away. Understandable. However, the more this was the case, the more he couldn't let this headless zombie out. Lin Jin suddenly said, "Brother Tiger, the immortal corroding corpse refinement energy in your body is one of the evil supernatural powers of a corpse cultivator. Later, I will use the spirit refinement technique to force this immortal corroding corpse refinement energy out of your body. This thing is extremely terrifying, and we can't leave it in the outside world. Otherwise, it would surely poison everyone to death. When that happens, half of Liangzhou would become a wasteland. Even the inhabitants of Liangzhou can't afford to let this happen. That's why we have to use the painting realm to seal this immortal corroding corpse refinement energy and headless zombie here." Daoist, who had heard about this from Lin Jin before. "The only thing I'm worried about now is that the immortal eroding corpse refining energy will neutralize the headless zombie. This will make this evil entity even more powerful, making it even more difficult to suppress it. But based on my calculations, although these two evil entities come from the same place, they might not neutralize each other. They will repel and suppress each other. With this, a balance can be formed. With the demon sealing sword seal, we don't have to worry about it for the time being." Lin Jin continued. This was the only solution he could think of. Chapter 582. After a moment of contemplation, Taoist, who said, "Brother Lin, this is too dangerous. Why don't we just give up? The immortal devouring energy has been with me for hundreds of years. At most, I can still take it." Lin Jin shook his head. "Brother Tiger, you should know better than anyone that you're already at the end of your rope. If this goes on, you'll be turned into a zombie by the immortal devouring energy in a few years. That would be even more troublesome." This was true, and Taoist, who knew it too. Hence, after some thought, he didn't say anything else. In fact, Lin Jin had another worry. He was worried that Taoist's corpse would come after noticing the immortal devouring energy. Who knew what would happen then? Hence, if he could resolve this problem as soon as possible, he shouldn't drag it out. Many things that were difficult to clean up in the end were usually dragged out. However, Lin Jin still had to think about how to proceed. Lin Jin had experienced the ferocity of the headless zombie, and the immortal devouring energy wasn't simple either. After staying in Taoist whose body for hundreds of years, it had developed some sentience. Lin Jin was worried that if he forced the immortal devouring energy out, the headless zombie and the immortal devouring energy wouldn't clash. If that happened, the balance Lin Jin envisioned wouldn't be achieved. Hence, he had to lure it into a fight. How? That was the key. Suddenly, Lin Jin turned to Taoist who, in an idea, came to him. The immortal devouring energy had been pestering Taoist who for hundreds of years with the goal of refining him. This was the key to the immortal devouring energy gaining sentience. It was also a form of obsession. The more impossible it was to achieve, the stronger this obsession became. This was why the immortal devouring energy was so difficult to deal with. Even with Taoist whose strength, he couldn't do anything about it and was on the verge of defeat. If the headless zombie's corpse were to be contaminated by Taoist who, the immortal devouring energy would surely retaliate. With that in mind, Lin Jin acted immediately. He first had Xu Xiao Lu stabilize this layer of the painting realm, and then he flew down with Taoist who to observe the headless zombie from a close distance. That required even more courage. Even with the demon sealing sword suppression, the aura of death here was still thick. The ground had been completely corroded, forming a black substance that resembled pitch that was slowly spreading. At this, Lin Jin couldn't help but feel sorry for Xu Xiaolu. The painting realm could be considered the foundation of the little book building, and even though the headless zombie was sealed, it was still corroding everything around it. The corroding painting realm could also be considered as the corroding book pavilion. This was like a thorn in his heart. Even if it wouldn't affect him much in the short term, a thorn was still a thorn. It wouldn't disappear just because it was small. Lin Jin had no idea what this feeling was, but he knew it wasn't pleasant. It was for this reason that Lin Jin decided to take the risk. Based on his calculations, the immortal corroding energy could greatly suppress the headless zombie. This way, the headless zombie's corrosion would also stop under the suppression of the immortal eroding corpse chi and the demon sealing sword, and even shrink. There was one more thing. Only under these circumstances would Lin Jin have a chance to approach the headless zombie. Then, Lin Jin planned to feed a monster-sealing pill into the creature's mouth. This was all Lin Jin's brainwave. The headless zombie was a corpse that had gained sentience, so from a certain perspective, it could be considered a zombie monster. Since that was the case, feeding it the monster-sealing pill might produce an unexpected effect. Even if it didn't work, it didn't matter. He wouldn't lose anything by giving it a try. At most, he would just lose some monster-sealing pills. In any case, Lin Jin had prepared quite a lot to deal with the monsters in Blackwind Cave. Due to Taoist who, he had saved up on them, and now they came in handy. At such a close distance, Lin Jin could see that the headless zombie was quite sturdy. Even without a head, it was still much taller than Lin Jin. The demon's sealing sword pierced through its body. The headless zombie was now hunched over and motionless, but that dangerous aura still remained. Brother Tiger, stay here and don't move. No matter what happens, you can only run if I tell you to. Otherwise, don't do anything reckless, Lin Jin reminded again. Taoist who laughed. Don't worry, Brother Lin. Just do whatever you want to do. Lin Jin nodded. Taoist who was powerful. Even if he hadn't improved after centuries of resisting the zombie energy, he was still ridiculously strong. His steel-like body was able to withstand the corrosion of death's aura far more than an average person. This was also where Lin Jin's confidence in choosing this method came from. Had it been anyone else, Lin Jin wouldn't have dared to do this. All right, let's begin. Brother Tiger, go over and grab this headless zombie's hand. Lin Jin said, but Taoist who was clearly stunned. Grab a zombie's hand. Taoist who glanced at the headless zombie's hand, his scalp tingling. Seeing Lin Jin nod, Taoist who recalled his boast earlier and gritted his teeth. He had no choice but to bite the bullet. As he got closer, Taoist who steeled his heart, and reached out to grab the zombie's hand. In an instant, the motionless zombie seemed to come to life. The large eyes on its nipples abruptly opened, and its purplish-green hand reached out to grab Taoist Hu's wrist. Such strength! Taoist Hu was shocked, but he wasn't one to be trifled with. Enraged, he began to wrestle with the headless zombie. If Taoist Hu didn't use his strength, his arm would be ripped off by the headless zombie. This was considered a hand-to-hand fight. Perhaps only someone of Taoist Hu's caliber could go toe-to-toe with a creature as ferocious as the headless zombie. Meanwhile, Lin Jin retreated to a distance of 10 feet away to observe. Taoist Hu's muscles were bulging and his body had doubled in size, revealing his ferocious tiger form. In terms of strength, he was now stronger than the headless zombie. He was indeed ferocious. But just then, a cloud of death energy surged out of the headless zombie's hand. Knowing this was the moment, Lin Jin immediately invoked a spell and shot out a dozen needles into Taoist Hu's body. Lin Jin wanted to force out the immortal corroding and refined corpse energy. In fact, if Lin Jin were to force it, the immortal corroding and refined corpse energy would automatically fight against the headless zombie's corpse energy, and the battlefield would be Taoist Hu's arm. Now, Taoist Hu was in excruciating pain. He gritted his teeth and was drenched in sweat. Lin Jin continued with his needles. This time, Lin Jin exerted his full strength, forcing the two types of corpse energy out of Taoist Hu's body and into the headless zombie's body. Once there was nothing left of the corpse energy, Lin Jin shouted, "Run!" Taoist Hu had been waiting for this. He immediately struggled free and retreated 1,000 feet away before collapsing to the ground, panting heavily. Taoist Hu's arm was riddled with wounds, caused by the two types of corpse energy fighting each other. However, Lin Jin could tell that Taoist Hu was fine now. These external injuries were nothing to Lin Jin. Even the wound on Taoist Hu's back was healing under his powerful healing powers. Chapter 583. Without the obstruction of corpse energy, Taoist Tiger's body could recover in a short period of time, even if it was severely injured. It was clearly written in the Tao Monarch's heavenly book that Taoist Tiger's body was the strongest among the 6 beasts. If even the Tao Monarch said so, then it must be true. Moreover, Taoist Tiger could withstand the terrifying corpse energy for hundreds of years. Taoist Tiger could really be called the strongest body. Ignoring Taoist Hu for now, Lin Jin focused all his attention on the headless zombie. The forced immortal erosion refining energy naturally flowed into the headless zombie's arm. The two different types of corpse energy were currently engaged in a frenzy, devouring each other. However, no matter which side it was, they were not weak. Therefore, this battle had clearly fallen into some kind of fierce battle, and no one could do anything to the other. Lin Jin watched anxiously from the side. He had to ensure that everything was going according to his plan and that nothing else could go wrong. Otherwise, if things went out of control, Xu Xiaolu would be the first to suffer. At that moment, the corpse energy on the headless zombie's body surged. It seemed to have been stimulated by the immortal eroding and refining corpse energy. Hence, the power that was originally suppressed loosened a little and began to move violently. The headless zombie was even struggling, trying to break free from the demon's sealing sword suppression. This wasn't good. Lin Jin could tell that the headless zombie had the upper hand. This wasn't a situation Lin Jin wanted to see happen. If the immortal devouring energy couldn't suppress the headless zombie, or if the zombie could even resist the demon sealing sword suppression, things would get troublesome from here on out. Fortunately, Lin Jin was prepared. With a flick of his finger, Lin Jin pierced the headless zombie's acupoints, using the spirit forging needle to suppress the creature. At the same time, Lin Jin waited for an opportunity to pounce over and toss a monster-sealing pill into the headless zombie's abdomen mouth. Regardless of whether it worked or not, there was no harm in trying. What Lin Jin needed now was absolute certainty. He even had a plan to use this opportunity to suppress the headless zombie completely, or even control it. With that, Xu Xiaolu's painting realm wouldn't be eroded anymore. Now that the headless zombie had been attacked from all sides, the rampaging zombie energy gradually weakened. Just as Lin Jin predicted, a balance was formed between the zombies. The immortal devouring and refining energy was probably trying to take over the headless zombie's body. However, the needles Lin Jin had left in the zombie's body began to move, releasing the zombie's corpse energy. The immortal devouring and refining energy couldn't do anything about it now. An equilibrium was formed. This was a bit like stacking blocks to build a tower. You had to stack them up one by one to ensure balance and stability. When the last block was placed up, the tower would be maintained. That was all. What Lin Jin was doing now was exactly the same. It might seem simple, but in fact, it required powerful supernatural powers and time. By the time the headless zombie fell into a deep slumber and the aura stopped spreading, Lin Jin realized that several hours had passed. He was drenched in sweat. Manipulating the silver needles was also very taxing on one's mind. Fortunately, the matter was temporarily suppressed. This result was pretty good. He had solved the problem of the immortal devouring refined corpse chi. He had also used the immortal devouring refined corpse chi to further suppress the headless zombie. The corpse chi that had been spreading slowly before was now under control. However, Lin Jin was still a little dissatisfied, because he realized that the monster sealing pill he stuffed into the headless zombie's stomach didn't seem to be of any use. It could only be said that the headless zombie was different from regular monsters. The surrounding aura that resembled black lava had calmed down. However, it had spread for more than 10,000 feet. These things are difficult to get rid of and would always be a huge threat. However, Lin Jin didn't have any better ideas, so he could only leave it be for now until he found a way to deal with it. Now that the problem was solved, Taoist, who was the most excited. After all, the corpse aura that had tormented him for hundreds of years was gone. His entire body felt much more relaxed, and the pain that had been tormenting him at all times also disappeared without a trace. Clearly, this was the first time in hundreds of years that Taoist who felt refreshed. Brother Lin, Taoist who went up and bowed. Lin Jin quickly helped Taoist who up and comforted him. This made the straightforward Taoist who admire Lin Jin even more, and their friendship deepened. Lin Jin quickly helped Taoist who up and consoled him. Taoist who was even more impressed by Lin Jin, and their friendship deepened. Lin Jin looked up at Xu Xiaolu, and the latter understood his intention. With a wave of his hand, the painting world was sealed off completely. In the blink of an eye, the three of them were inside Peach Blossom residence. Lin Jin naturally thanked Xu Xiaolu along with Taoist who, and the latter accepted it calmly. She had contributed the most to this project. After all, a creature as ferocious as the headless zombie was sealed inside her painting world. Needless to say, it had a huge impact on her painting world. However, Xu Xiaolu had never mentioned it. Lin Jin knew her personality. If it was something insignificant, she might announce it to the world and come here to claim credit. She might even throw a tantrum and complain. But if it was something serious, she wouldn't say a word. She would bear it silently. Lin Jin understood Xu Xiaolu, just like how Xu Xiaolu understood him. 1 second ago, Xu Xiaolu seemed to be angry about something. But in the next, she seemed to have made a new discovery, and her previous anger was instantly forgotten. Lin Jin, what's that sword hanging on your waist? Xu Xiaolu stared at the breezy monster sword hanging on Lin Jin's waist, her eyes filled with excitement, as if she had discovered something valuable. Lin Jin quickly took off the breezy monster sword. He had planned to ask Xu Xiaolu about it when he had the time. After all, this painting spirit of Xu Xiaolu's must know more about monsters than he did. This is a sword spirit. Take a look. Xu Xiaolu. Lin Jin handed it over. The latter took it without the slightest hint of embarrassment. It really is a sword spirit. How rare, how rare. Xu Xiaolu was beaming. At this moment, it was as if they had returned to the Academy's Peach Blossom residence. Taoist Tiger wanted to interject several times, but he held back in the end. The more he looked at the sword, the more familiar it seemed. In the end, realization dawned on him as he mused. Isn't this the breezy flag master from Blackwind Cave, who knew he had been subdued by Brother Lin? Taoist who was impressed by this. Even he couldn't do it if he were in Lin Jin's shoes. Xu Xiaolu looked left and right, tried to pull the sword out. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't get the sword out of its scabbard. It was as if it was welded to the scabbard. Forget it, this sword spirit has already recognized a master, so I won't be able to pull it out. However, this sword's origins are definitely not small. The sword spirit on it is pure and mellow. The spirit's age might be even greater than mine. Xiao Shulu said. Lin Jin's heart skipped a beat. If someone else had said this, Lin Jin wouldn't have taken it seriously. But since it came from Xu Xiaolu, he had to take it seriously. Chapter 584. Art spirits and sword spirits were essentially the same, so Lin Jin immediately took Xu Xiaolu's word seriously. If this breezy sword spirit had existed longer than Xu Xiaolu, then this thing might be a relic left behind from the immortal era. Xu Xiaolu couldn't pull out the sword, so she asked Lin Jin to give it a try. Lin Jin managed to pull it out easily. However, Lin Jin hadn't noticed the sword spirit acknowledging him as its master. Could it be something that happened when he subdued this breezy sword? That was possible. Back then, Lin Jin used Sky's scorching palm to unleash powerful flames. Since the ancient times, metal and iron were afraid of fire. Perhaps it was because he subdued the monster sword and forced it to acknowledge him as its master. Interestingly, Lin Jin didn't know about this himself. Xu Xiaolu clearly enjoyed researching new and interesting things like this. She was definitely well-read and had a deep understanding of the evolution of the current monsters. A sword spirit that recognizes its master is considered a powerful defensive measure. However, this sword of yours seems to be lacking something else. If it were, its strength would increase by more than 10 times. Lin Jin couldn't tell if Xu Xiaolu was being serious or just trying to fool Lin Jin. Either way, Lin Jin was filled with anticipation. What is it missing? Lin Jin asked. Swordsmanship. Xu Xiaolu thought about it, then said, this sword is extremely sharp, there is no doubt about it, but this sword spirit's realm is clearly not high. Even it itself could not unleash the sword's full power. Logically speaking, there should be some corresponding sword techniques that can control the sword spirit and unleash the sword's sharpness. Lin Jin nodded after some thought. Xu Xiaolu's words made sense. Lin Jin had met this breezy flag spirit before. She wasn't weak, but she was facing Lin Jin. Had it been anyone else, they might not even be a match for her. More importantly, this breezy flag spirit didn't have a barbaric personality. Instead, she had the elegance of a scholar. What did this mean? It meant that when this sword spirit was born, she was taught by a human. Otherwise, she wouldn't be like this. Lin Jin explained this to Xu Xiaolu. The latter tilted her head in thought before slapping her thigh. I see. From the looks of it, she seemed to know something. Lin Jin quickly inquired. Xu Xiaolu laughed. It's just like a ferocious tiger being sent to a vegetarian temple, where it has to eat vegetarian food and chant Buddhist prayers all day long, suppressing its natural instincts. At the very least, it can't bring out its strengths. What are the strengths of a ferocious tiger? Of course, they have sharp claws and fangs. Even carnivores. Lin Jin immediately felt as if he had seen the sun after the clouds had been dispelled. Xu Xiaolu, are you saying that the clear wind bewitching sword is the same? Lin Jin asked. Xu Xiaolu nodded. Is there a need to ask? To put it bluntly, this blade spirit doesn't know how to use his strengths and talents at all. It's just like how a ferocious tiger eats vegetarian food and prays to Buddha. It must have listened to some useless scholar's lectures before gaining sentience. However, it neglected the nature of the weapon. With this explanation, Lin Jin finally understood. A tiger raised by lambs yearned to become a lamb. However, a ferocious tiger was a ferocious tiger after all. It only needed a little guidance for its nature to erupt. It was the same for the Qingfeng sword. Hence, the Qingfeng sword had to learn swordsmanship and undergo training. In all honesty, this could be considered your opportunity. This sword spirit is not to be underestimated. If he was extremely sharp right from the start, reaching the peak, then you wouldn't have a chance to subdue him at all. Xu Xiaolu said. This was good luck. Lin Jin didn't deny it. As the two of them chimed in and chatted away, Taoist, who was confused, but he knew that the sword in Lin Jin's hand was his Black Wind Cave's second in command. He hadn't noticed it before, but now, Taoist, who finally found an opportunity to interject. Flag Master Qingfeng does like to chew on words. Sometimes, he would even come over to preach some great philosophy to me. Just listening to him gives me a headache. His personality really needs to be changed. Since he's a blade spirit, he should be able to destroy the world without competing with others. What future can he have if he only knows how to talk about philosophy? It was obvious that Taoist, who didn't mind that Lin Jin had subdued Black Wind Cave's second in command. Lin Jin had saved his life, and they were now sworn brothers, so Taoist who wouldn't mind a trivial matter like this. If Lin Jin could teach Flag Master Qingfeng a good lesson, Taoist would be more than happy to do so. After all, he had known Flag Master Qingfeng for hundreds of years. A sword was a sword. Why pretend to be a scholar? With Little Book Tower's guidance and reminder, Lin Jin instantly felt enlightened and his mind cleared up. He wasn't particularly fond of studying swordsmanship and skills. But coincidentally, Lin Jin wasn't completely different. On the contrary, he had reached a height in the field of swordsmanship that ordinary people couldn't hope to achieve. Even the divine sword scroll he obtained by chance in the unending nature landscape allowed him to condense a sword intent with his psyche to kill without leaving a trace. However, Lin Jin stopped studying it. After all, he didn't have much talent when it came to swordsmanship. His sword intent was only so powerful because of the divine sword scroll. Lin Jin had at least this much self-awareness. However, the divine sword scroll was undeniably powerful. Hence, after listening to Xu Xiaolu's analysis, Lin Jin immediately thought of this. It would be a waste for such a powerful divine sword scroll to rot in his hands. He might as well pass it on to Qingfeng. Moreover, according to Xu Xiaolu, since the sword had acknowledged him as its master, it would never betray him again. Since that was the case, passing the divine sword scroll to Qingfeng seemed to be the most suitable choice. Lin Jin was also thinking of ways to improve his strength. The Qingfeng sword was decent at the moment, but it was still a distance away from becoming a top-tier combatant. Needless to say, it wouldn't be able to deal with an existence like Corpse Dao. If Lin Jin could use the divine sword scroll to raise the Qingfeng sword scroll strength, that would be great. However, this matter wasn't urgent. Lin Jin instructed Xu Xiaolu to keep an eye on the headless zombie in the painting world. This thing couldn't be removed right now. Even though it was a terrifying ticking time bomb, it had to stay here. Hence, if anything out of the ordinary happened, they had to react immediately. Xu Xiaolu was even more concerned about this than Lin Jin was. After all, if something happened to the headless zombie, she would be the first one to suffer. Don't worry, Xu Xiaolu waved. Lin Jin still had a lot of things to do, so after chatting for a while longer, he got up to leave. Taoist, who quickly said his goodbyes as well. This time, Taoist, who didn't say much and just listened to Lin Jin and Xu Xiaolu. Go on, go on. Don't come to my painting world if there's nothing important. Nothing good ever comes out of your visit. Xu Xiaolu clearly didn't mean what she said. Despite what she said, she was actually thinking the exact opposite. Lin Jin knew that. Just as he was about to use Cosmos Ink, Lin Jin suddenly remembered something and said, Xu Xiaolu, with your beast appraising skills, you could have been promoted to a rank 6 beast appraiser long ago. Zhong Zifeng could have been a rank 5 beast appraiser too. The only reason he didn't is because he respects you and doesn't dare to surpass you in terms of beast appraiser rank. Even if it's for the sake of others, you should consider getting promoted. Chapter 585. Lin Jin had long wanted to say this to Xu Xiaolu, but never had the chance. Now that he thought of it, he decided to. After all, Mr. Zhong was a decent person. Even if it was for his sake, Lin Jin felt that he should say this. It was also because no one else dared to say this to Xu Xiaolu except himself. Promotion to rank 6? Xu Xiaolu didn't seem to mind. What's the point of that? But since you're the one who suggested it, I'll consider it. What's there to consider? It's decided. Lin Jin could still make some decisions for Xu Xiaolu, even if he had to force her to do so. All right, but I want curator to perform the ceremony for me. Xu Xiaolu began negotiating. Lin Jin was stunned. Then, he came to a realization. A ceremony wasn't a trivial matter, but it was necessary. In this day and age, the only person who could surpass Xu Xiaolu in beast appraising was curator. In this case, the only person who was qualified to give such a ceremony to the small book pavilion was the curator. This wasn't a big deal to Lin Jin. After all, he was the curator. Hence, he readily agreed. I can assure you of my master's condition now. Let's set a time, and I'll call my master over. Lin Jin nodded. After Lin Jin said this, Xiaolu no longer had any meaning to it, so the matter was settled. It will be set for 3 months from now. Having said that, Lin Jin activated Cosmos Inc. and left the painting world with Taoist Hu. Back in Black Wind Cave, Taoist Hu had just gotten rid of his corpse energy, so he needed to recuperate in seclusion to recover the energy he had lost over the years. Lin Jin also had to teach Breezy Monster the Divine Sword. Lin Jin was looking forward to it. As for the Five Palms Landscape Cult, Lin Jin wasn't in a hurry. The Four Seas Freedom Gourd had been there for centuries, so a few more days wouldn't matter. Moreover, Lin Jin was now doubtful of Taoist Hu's evaluation of Water God Cult. Taoist Hu said that Water God Cult was a motley crew, but was that really the case? To be able to operate in Liangzhou for centuries meant that they were capable. Even so, Lin Jin couldn't let his guard down. Taoist Hu's cave abode wasn't small, so Lin Jin took up an entire room. He removed Breezy Monster and placed it on the stone table before sitting down cross-legged to recite the Divine Sword steps. After reciting it once, Lin Jin paused for a moment to observe the Breezy Monster sword. The sword that had been motionless at first began to tremble, as if it was reacting to extreme excitement. Lin Jin smiled. That was right. Even someone like him, who did not care much about the way of the sword, was immediately attracted by the contents of the heavenly Tao sword invitation when he first saw it. If he was already like this, then there was no need to mention a sword spirit. To use an analogy, it was like a tiger that had grown up in a temple and was eating meat for the first time. It had to be. Right now, the Clear Wind Demon Sword was like this. In fact, it was even more inferior. In the next instant, a silhouette emerged from the blade. It was the Flag Master from before. The Flag Master looked incredibly excited as he prostrated himself at the sight of Lin Jin. Seeing this, Lin Jin began to explain his understanding of the Divine Sword steps. These were some of Lin Jin's personal knowledge. After all, he had cultivated and studied the steps himself, so he had more or less gained some insights. These insights would definitely help the Breezy Monster avoid detours. This time, Lin Jin explained in great detail. It took him several hours to explain his understanding and insights. The Breezy Monster listened attentively throughout the process. Then, the Breezy Monster's shadow bowed at Lin Jin before turning into a stream of light and returning to the sword. Then, a layer of light appeared on the monster's sword. It floated like a cloud, yet also resembled a colorful sunset. It was a mystical sight to behold. Lin Jin knew that the Breezy Sword was probably digesting the contents of the Divine Sword Scroll. Now that he thought about it, teaching the Breezy Sword the Divine Sword Scroll was a wise decision, and it would definitely be effective. But how effective was it? Lin Jin wasn't sure. Without disturbing the Breezy Monster from studying the Divine Sword steps, Lin Jin began to wander around Protector Hu's cave. Noticing that Lin Jin had come out of seclusion, Protector Hu came out as well. "Ha, Brother Lin, it's all thanks to you this time. It's been centuries, and this is the first time I've felt so relaxed." After a round of recovery, Protector Hu was in high spirits, as if he had been reborn. Being tormented by corpse energy for centuries wasn't a comfortable experience. Fortunately, Protector Hu was strong enough to last this long. Had it been anyone else, they would have been turned into a zombie by now. Lin Jin went over to take a look at Protector Who. Not bad. Protector Who had fully recovered. There was no corpse energy left in his body, and the wound on his back had healed completely. Although it was no longer a big problem, Daoist whose losses were still quite large. Over the past few hundred years, his cultivation had not progressed much. It was still the same as before. From what Lin Jin could tell, Protector Who was probably the weakest among the 6 beasts Lin Jin had ever met. He might even be weaker than the insect beastmaster Lin Jin met at the beginning. However, given Daoist Tiger's talent, his strength would rise in the future. There was no need for Lin Jin to tell Protector Who about this. Lin Jin suggested that they stay in Black Wind Cave and gather the monsters together. When Lin Jin and Protector Who appeared, the monsters in Black Wind Cave immediately bowed in unison. This included the monsters who had pledged allegiance to Lin Jin. Protector Who was a straightforward person. When Lin Jin said he wanted to gather the monsters and guide them onto the right path, Protector Who took it seriously. Speaking of all these years, Daoist Who didn't manage the demonic beasts in the cave, and he felt quite ashamed. At the same time, he knew that his personality was free and unrestrained, and he wasn't suited to rule the Black Wind Cave. All these years, he had been a hands-off shopkeeper. The matters of the cave were all handled by the Clear Wind Flagmaster and the Fierce Wind Flagmaster, his 2 right-hand men. This time, after recovering from his injuries, Daoist Who planned to give up his position completely. After all, he still had a lot of things to do, one of which was to find Corpse Dao for revenge. This was the most important thing that Daoist Who would do next. After summoning all the monsters, Protector Who announced that he was giving up the position of Cave Master to Lin Jin. It was simple, straightforward, and it only took 1 sentence. "Greetings, new Cave Master." A monster with quick reflexes immediately went up to greet Lin Jin. With a monster taking the lead, the others followed suit, scrambling to be first. It was done. It was even easier than Lin Jin expected. This was all thanks to Protector Who. According to Protector Who, most of the monsters in Black Wind Cave had cultivated into monsters, so their loyalty wasn't a problem. However, just to be safe, Lin Jin chose a dozen or so flag beasts with the best qualifications and fed them a monster sealing pill before teaching them the orthodox beast energy formation. Chapter 586. Lin Jin already had the complete beast energy formation. Apart from that, he also had the demonic emperor technique. Just these alone were enough to raise the strength of Black Wind Cave's monsters to another level. However, Lin Jin didn't impart the technique to everyone. He first taught the beast energy formation to the 10 or so flag bearers he handpicked. Once they learned it, they would pass it on to the other monsters according to his rules. In addition, Taoist whose management of Black Wind Cave's monsters was extremely lax. There were no rules at all. Even if there were, they could be counted on one hand. This clearly wouldn't do. After a quick count, Black Wind Cave had close to 100 monsters that could transform. This so-called transformation included those that were half human and half beast. In fact, monsters that could truly master the art of transfiguration were few and far between. There were more that couldn't transform. Some had gained sentience, some were still wild, and some were still muddle-headed. There were about 200 to 300 of them. Black Wind Cave was quite a sight to behold. There was no lack of rare beasts among them. Even Lin Jin was seeing some for the first time. After all, Liangzhou and Zhongzhou were thousands of miles apart. Their different geographical features meant that the beasts they produced were different as well. Lin Jin obviously liked these. Next, he ordered for all monsters, including the wild beasts, to be checked one by one. He was using this opportunity to record them into the Museum of Deadly Beasts. Some of them had hidden illnesses, so Lin Jin treated them casually. This way, he managed to earn quite a bit of loyalty. Also, Lin Jin knew that nothing could be accomplished without rules. Hence, the first thing he did was to decide on Black Wind Cave's future development path and set a series of rules. If a sect were to look at it, they would be able to tell that this was a series of rules. It was obvious that Lin Jin wanted to turn Black Wind Cave into a sect for monster cultivators. This had been his initial plan. To become a sect, they would need a grandmaster. This was easy to solve. Lin Jin decided on 2 grandmasters for Black Wind Cave. One of them was obviously a Taoist. This was easy to understand. As Taoist who was the cave master, there was nothing wrong with his master becoming the grandmaster. Moreover, in terms of strength and reputation, the Taoist name was extremely well known. As for the second grandmaster, Lin Jin decided on him as curator. He had a plan for this. The Black Wind Tunnel was a powerful aid he had arranged for the curator. Under extreme circumstances, it could become an incomparably tyrannical combat force, and on normal days, it could also increase the curator's reputation. Think about it. If the Black Wind Cave, a demonic cultivation sect, were to rise to prominence and its name would resound throughout the world, then as the founder, the curator, his status would definitely rise as well. That kind of hidden deterrence was also a part of his strength. In the future, no matter where he went, just this name alone would be enough to make most of his enemies surrender without a fight. Although Lin Jin wasn't an expert in this field, he was well aware of the principles behind it. Furthermore, teaching these demonic beasts to walk the right path and do good deeds was also a merit. What came next was the rules Lin Jin had set up on behalf of the 2 patriarchs. There were 60 or 70 of them, and they were all about leading people to do good, to do proper things, and to be open and above board. For this reason, Lin Jin had specially selected a dozen of the strongest cultivators to form an enforcement team to enforce the sect's rules. Anyone who disobeyed would be punished according to sect rules. At first, a few insolent fellows would definitely die. But as the saying went, kill the chicken to warn the monkey. Only by doing so could the other monsters understand the importance of obeying the sect's rules. Although there were a lot of things to do, Lin Jin handled them in an orderly manner. In just 2 days, he had sorted out Black Wind Tunnel matters. Next up, he just had to follow the prescribed order. For the past 2 days, Lin Jin had been waiting for the breezy monster. Ever since he imparted the Divine Path Sword Scroll, the breezy monster had entered a mystical cultivation state. Just like a person in meditation, Lin Jin didn't disturb it, nor could he. He could only wait for the breezy monster to wake up on its own. However, 2 days had passed, and the breezy monster still showed no signs of waking up. After giving it some thought, Lin Jin decided not to wait any longer. He had to go to Mount Five Palms to retrieve the 4 Seas Freedom Gourd. Taoist who volunteered to go with him. Lin Jin didn't reject him. There was a possibility of conflict with Water God cult, so having one more expert meant a higher chance of success. Early in the morning, Lin Jin rode on a cloud and brought Taoist who with him to Mount Five Palms. In Liangzhou's territory, Mount Five Palms was a well-known place. Not only was it because of the unique scenery here, where several mountain ranges were joined together, looking like a palm from afar. It was a spectacular sight, but it was also because Water God cult had risen to fame here in recent centuries. To Lin Jin, while Mount Five Palms was majestic, it was too desolate. However, the center of Mount Five Palms was covered in lush greenery. It was said to be Liangzhou's largest oasis. Looking at it from afar, one could clearly see the green basin and the yellow sand next to it. Lin Jin didn't go down immediately. He was here for the 4 Seas Freedom Gourd. If Water God cult had nothing to do with the 4 Seas Freedom Gourd, Lin Jin wouldn't bother provoking them. Standing on a cloud 1,000 feet above the ground, Lin Jin saluted Taoist too. Brother Tiger, I'll be casting a spell to summon the Daelord's artifact later. Please guard me. Taoist who laughed heartily and nodded. Don't worry, brother. With me around, no one will be able to disturb your spell casting. Lin Jin had no doubt about this. After recuperating for the past few days, Taoist who had fully recovered his strength. To Lin Jin, there were only a handful of experts in this world who could defeat Taoist who. Invoking a spell, Lin Jin began casting the artifact manipulation spell recorded in Taoist whose heavenly scroll. Return to the 4 Seas, heaven and earth water, artifact, return. Opening his palm, An invisible wave of mana rippled out. Come to think of it, Lin Jin wasn't sure if this spell would work, but since it was mentioned in Daelord's heavenly book that this spell would work within 100 miles of the artifact, allowing him to summon and leave at will, Lin Jin had to give it a try. After all, Taoist whose heavenly scroll only mentioned that the artifact was hidden in Liangzhou's Mount Five Palms. Looking around, Mount Five Palms was a huge place. If Lin Jin had to rely on manpower, who knew how long it would take? Hence, using a spell to summon the artifact was the most convenient method. The first time Lin Jin cast the spell, nothing happened after a series of ripples. Lin Jin knew that either the artifact wasn't here, or his mana was too low. Immediately, flames surged out of Lin Jin's body. This was the power of his first blood contract pet beast, the Firewolf. Then, the flames turned blood red. This was the power of his second blood contract pet beast, the Ghost Blood Beast. Borrowing the power of 2 rank 5 pet beasts, Lin Jin cast the spell again. Rumble. There was a strange noise. Lin Jin could clearly sense that there was a response. No doubt it was the Four Seas Gourd. This discovery excited Lin Jin. It was good that the artifact was still here. Since it was responding, it meant that the mana was still there. As Lin Jin continued to cast his spell, Taoist who looked down at the commotion and was dumbfounded. Chapter 587. The Five Palms Mountain below was the oasis where the Water God sect was located. At this moment, there were bursts of roars, as if the sky was falling and the earth was collapsing. In fact, it was so. The headquarters of the Water God sect was built in this oasis. After hundreds of years of development, the power of the Water God sect was absolutely unparalleled in Liangzhou. The Water God sect was able to develop and dominate Liangzhou in hundreds of years because of its founder, Taoist Blackwater. That was the first generation of the Water God sect. For hundreds of years, the Water God sect had been passed down for 3 generations. There were thousands of members, many of whom were masters. Most of them were fugitives and bandits who had nowhere else to go. They came to the Water God sect to seek shelter, and the Water God sect accepted them all. One could imagine that the cult was filled with murderous maniacs. What they did was definitely not a good deed. They would do anything to achieve their goals. It was all thanks to the Water God cult that the Liangzhou had been in chaos for 100 years. In Liangzhou, only the Water God sect bullied others. They had never been bullied by others. Today, there was a sudden, earth-shattering tremor, which directly stunned the people at the headquarters of the Water God sect. Soon, they knew that someone had come to their door to fight. How could this be? There are people in the sky. A sharp-eyed member of the sect pointed at 2 figures on a cloud above his head and shouted. Immediately, some masters who could fly in the sky displayed their skills and flew into the sky. Go and report to the leader. The other members who could not fly in the sky immediately took action. In fact, at this time, the 3rd leader of the Water God sect, Taoist Redwater, was already alarmed. Not only him, but the 2 former leaders who had been in seclusion were also alarmed. One was the 2nd leader, Taoist Blackwater, and the other was the founder of the Water God sect, Taoist Blackwater. These 2 had retired behind the scenes and had been in seclusion. What were they doing? They were studying a treasure. Taoist Blackwater had relied on this treasure to show his strength and establish the Water God sect. Today, as usual, the 2 former leaders were in seclusion in a very secret place in the headquarters. There was a gourd floating above a pool. This gourd looked as if it was carved out of crystal. It was sparkling and translucent, like a 10,000-year-old profound ice. The mouth of the gourd opened wide, and a steady stream of water flowed out. It was as if there were spiritual water dragons, and it entered the profound pool below. The opening of the pool didn't seem big, but it was so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. It was connected to the underground undercurrents, and it was also the reason why this oasis could be so prosperous. One had to know that hundreds of years ago, the Five Palms Mountain River was the same as the majority of the Liang province. It was barren and had no water source at all. With this gourd, water could be produced out of thin air. With this, the water god sect could grow bigger and bigger. Apart from that, this gourd contained some kind of divine ability. Even if it just stayed by its side, it would be able to absorb an endless amount of water spiritual energy, and it could even extend one's lifespan. The first generation sect master, Taoist Blackwater, was already 531 years old. In terms of lifespan, he was already comparable to some of the ancient loose immortals. Unless he had some special secret arts, it was impossible for a human below the immortal realm to live for so long. However, Taoist Blackwater had only lived for so long, and the key was the gourd. Taoist Blackwater was also a genius of his generation. After 100 years, he had actually comprehended a method of absorbing spiritual energy from the temple, which could absorb water spiritual energy and extend his lifespan. Even so, Taoist Blackwater was already extremely old. Perhaps after a few more years, even with this gourd, he wouldn't be able to survive. It was precisely because of this that Taoist Blackwater hadn't taken a single step out of the gourd in the last few tens of years, and he stayed by its side day and night precisely because he relied on the water spirit energy within the gourd to nourish his body. Once he left, then perhaps he would lose the nourishment of the water spirit energy within a few hours and become a dried corpse. The second generation sect master, Taoist Blackwater, was a disciple that Taoist Blackwater had accepted 200 years ago. He looked very old now, and his cultivation was not bad, but it was not as good as Taoist Blackwater. He was also relying on the gourd to survive. Now, the affairs of the water god sect had been handed over to Taoist Blackwater's disciple, Taoist Redwater, who had been accepted by Taoist Blackwater 80 years ago. The two of them were focused on seclusion to comprehend the path of longevity. Just now, the originally stable gourd suddenly glowed brightly and began to vibrate. Taoist Blackwater and Taoist Uwater were startled. They had been guarding this place for hundreds of years, and this was their first time encountering such a situation. Their eyes widened, unsure of what was happening. Taoist Uwater immediately waved his big sleeve, and a flying snake fish flew out from his sleeve. This was a strange beast with a water attribute that could survive in places without water. It could fly and was extremely ferocious. It liked to eat animals like tigers and leopards and was extremely rare. This beast was Taoist Uwater's pet beast. It had been with him for more than 200 years, and its strength had reached rank 5. Calm down, Uwater. Taoist Blackwater was astute and steady. He got up, cast a spell, and strengthened the barrier. They had set up many formations here. Taoist Blackwater was confident that even if someone wanted to ambush them, they wouldn't be able to get in. As for why the gourd was acting strangely, they just had to wait and see. However, at this moment, a voice seemed to ring out. Return to the 4 seas. Absorb the water of the universe. Return to the treasure. It was Lin Jin's incantation. The mantra was transferred to the 4 seas freedom gourd, activating the magic power of the magic treasure. It could be said that the magic power of the magic treasure intertwined with each other. The treasured gourd began to move. It began to break the restrictive spells set up by Taoist Blackwater bit by bit. Taoist Blackwater was shocked. Someone's after the gourd. Taoist Blackwater wouldn't have panicked over anything else. After all, he had lived for more than 500 years, so he had the mental fortitude to do so. But when it came to the gourd, he couldn't. This item was Taoist Blackwater's lifeblood. He couldn't afford to lose it. Anxious, he continued to cast his spell. But it was too late. With a loud rumble, the 4 seas freedom gourd shone brightly, breaking through the many barriers Taoist Blackwater had set up. It then broke through the ceiling of the cave and flew up. Come back! Taoist Blackwater shrieked. While he was horrified, he was also filled with hatred. Who was it? Who wanted to take away my treasure? For hundreds of years, Taoist Blackwater had treated the 4 seas freedom gourd as his personal property. He wouldn't allow anyone to lay a finger on it. It wasn't just him. Taoist Uwater was furious too. He too relied on the 4 seas freedom gourd to keep himself alive. If he lost this treasure, he wouldn't be able to live for more than a few years. The two old geezers immediately flew out in search of the Four Seas Freedom Gourd. However, the Four Seas Gourd was imbued with powerful mana, so its speed was unbelievable. By now, the gourd had transformed into a streak of light, reaching the clouds in the blink of an eye and landing in Lin Jin's hand. Chapter 588. It's here. Lin Jin stared at the Four Seas gourd in his hand, overwhelmed with excitement. As if it had found its master, the gourd glowed with a watery glow as if it was overjoyed. It really is Master's artifact. Seeing the Four Seas gourd, Taoist who let out a long sigh. His eyes drifted as if he was reminiscing about something. Lin Jin had a special mantra to control the artifact. Without the Taoist around, the Four Seas gourd obviously acknowledged Lin Jin as its master. No one could compare to him in this aspect. Holding the Four Seas gourd in his hand, Lin Jin could immediately feel the wonders of this artifact. It was indescribably wonderful. However, at that moment, several furious roars came from below. "Who are you, you thief? How dare you steal my treasure?" Following the voice, Taoist Blackwater flew up. Taoist Blackwater was surrounded by a lot of black water, dragging his body through the air at an extremely fast speed. Behind him was an old Taoist who was riding on a flying snake fish. It was an imposing sight. And on land, at this time, a drought land crab beast appeared. This drought land crab beast body was extremely huge. On its rock-like back, there were even flames rising up. It was big enough to seat 100 people. However, only a red-robed Taoist was glaring at Lin Jin and Taoist who above the clouds. "So this is Taoist 3 Water," Lin Jin mumbled to himself as he stared at the three elderly Taoist figures. Although Taoists who rarely went out for hundreds of years, the Black Wind Cave and the Water God sect were both in Liangzhou, and they were considered neighbors. Taoists who more or less knew about the situation of his neighbors. Moreover, even if Taoists who didn't know, many of the hundreds of demon cultivators in the Black Wind Cave had dealt with the Water God sect, so they knew a lot of things. From the monsters, Lin Jin learned that the most powerful members of Water God cult were the three experts known as Taoist 3 Water. They were the first to third-generation Water God cult leaders. However, everyone assumed that the first and second-generation Water God cult leaders were dead. After all, they were figures from hundreds of years ago. No matter how powerful they couldn't have lived for so long. Hence, the current Water God cult should only be led by the third generation's leader, Taoist Redwater. However, from the looks of it, the 3 Water Tao cultivators of the Water God sect were still alive. Moreover, the Four Seas Freedom Gourd had always been under the control of the Water God sect. While Lin Jin was deep in thought, the man from Blackwater kept quiet. Wisps of black water gushed out of his body and condensed into a giant claw that swiped at Lin Jin and Taoist who. Impudent! Taoist who was enraged. He let out a tiger roar and raised his claw to attack. The two claws collided, creating a huge explosion. Black water splashed everywhere. They were actually evenly matched. At this time, Taoist whose expression slightly changed. He withdrew his hand and saw that the black liquid had corroded his skin. However, this wound quickly healed. The corrosive power of the black water wasn't weak at all. The black water that sprayed out of the water punctured the white cloud beneath Lin Jin's feet. Fortunately, it couldn't break through Lin Jin's 5 elemental armor. Clearly, the man from Blackwater recognized Taoist Tiger. At this moment, his eyes turned sinister and his aged face revealed a shocked expression. "It's you. You're the Black Wind Caves. Black Wind Cave Master." Taoist Blackwater exclaimed. "You haven't changed at all." Sure enough, monsters are stronger than humans. Taoist who studied Taoist Blackwater from head to toe. "So it's you, little Taoist. I haven't seen you for almost 500 years. You're still alive?" Back when Taoist Blackwater came to Liangzhou to establish the Water God sect, he once wanted to subdue the monsters of Black Wind Cave. Despite his confidence, he returned in defeat. He was defeated by Taoist who within 3 moves. Taoist who didn't kill him, merely humiliating him and chasing him away. After all, Taoist who was one of the 6 beasts. In a sense, he could be considered a Taoist. Taoist Blackwater was a Taoist too, so he was spared from death. Taoist Blackwater had never told anyone about this. From then on, the Water God sect didn't dare to enter Black Wind Cave's territory. Even after Taoist Blackwater's cultivation improved, he still kept his distance from Black Wind Cave. My Water God sect and Black Wind Cave have never interfered with each other. Why did you come to steal my sect's treasure? Taoist Blackwater knew that Taoist who wasn't someone to be trifled with. He could also tell that the one who stole the gourd was a very young man. Taoist Blackwater also noticed that Black Wind Cave's master was standing behind this young man, seemingly treating him as his master. Moreover, this young man's ability to take the gourd away through the air shocked Taoist Blackwater. But no matter what, he couldn't let go of this treasure. His life depended on it. Although Taoist Blackwater had reached the limit of his lifespan, if he had the gourd, living for a few more years wouldn't be a problem. In fact, if he could improve his cultivation, he could live even longer. However, without the gourd, Taoist Blackwater wouldn't be able to live much longer. Hence, there was no room for negotiation. He would fight anyone who tried to steal it. As they spoke, Taoist Yushui arrived on his flying snake. He was currently hovering nearby, glaring like a tiger at its prey, ready to fight to the death. Just like his master, Taoist Blackwater, he relied on the gourd to prolong his life. He would never let anyone take it away. Lin Jin glanced at the 2 elderly Taoists and shook his head. This isn't your water god cult's treasure. Let me ask you, do you know what this treasure is called? Taoist Blackwater and Taoist Yushui obviously didn't. Lin Jin continued. This is the 4 Seas unfettered gourd that Taoist Lord hid at the foot of Mount 5 Palms in Liangzhou. I've received Taoist Lord's inheritance, and I'm here to retrieve this treasure. Both of you may be lacking in cultivation, but you've managed to live so long because of the nourishment from this treasure's spiritual water essence. You've earned quite a bit, and now it's time to return this item to its rightful owner. If I were you, I would know what's good for me and leave. Lin Jin kept his guard up as he spoke. Simply put, if Taoist Blackwater listened to his advice, Lin Jin wouldn't have caused any trouble. But if he didn't know what was good for him and insisted on fighting for the 4 Seas unfettered gourd, Lin Jin wouldn't hold back. Having been through so much, Lin Jin was now a seasoned veteran. If the other party insisted on interrupting him, Lin Jin would strike first to gain the upper hand. Especially after the Water God cult had wreaked havoc in Liangzhou, Lin Jin was already thinking of eradicating them. You've gone too far. Taoist Blackwater cursed. Taoist Blackwater couldn't possibly give up in this situation. As a sly old fox, he knew he would have to make a move sooner or later. Hence, he had already sent Taoist Yushui and Taoist Redwater a telepathic message, instructing them to make a preemptive strike. To them, Black Wind Cave's master was the hardest to deal with. And no matter how skilled this young man was in spell casting, his physique couldn't possibly be that strong. With the 3 of them working together, they should be able to kill this young man in an instant. After they reclaimed the gourd, even if Black Wind Cave's master was relentless in his pursuit, the 3 of them would fight if they could. If they couldn't, they would just run. With the treasure in their hands, they could go anywhere in the world. Blackwater Taoist wasn't the kind of fool who would come out to die just because of a few taunts and insults. Taoist who knew this very well. He could only stare helplessly at the sand formation and say to Lin Jin, who knew that Water God cult would be so rich. He was referring to the yellow sand formation. Indeed, this yellow sand formation was amazing. Although it didn't have any offensive capabilities, its defensive capabilities were impressive. Truth be told, Lin Jin might not be stronger than Daoist, who in terms of offensive capabilities. If even Daoist who couldn't break this yellow sand formation, Lin Jin didn't think he could. Even Flame Blast wouldn't help. Within this great formation, the yellow sand constantly flowed. Once a part of it was broken, it would immediately be replenished from elsewhere. It could be said to be endless and continuous. Unless one could break through the yellow sand defense in one strike, the formation would always be replenished. Just as Daoists who said, Water God cult had been operating in Liangzhou for centuries, so it was impossible for them not to have some sort of background. However, that was all. To Lin Jin, Black Water Taoist cultivation level was only SOSO. He wasn't that impressive, but his rank 5 pet beast was rather difficult to deal with. Its rarity and means were probably on par with the Ghost Blood Beast. If Lin Jin didn't have 2 rank 5 pet beasts, dealing with Blackwater Taoist wouldn't have been so easy. What do we do now? I heard Blackwater Taoists say they're going to use some Tri-Water Beast Fusion technique. Are we just going to wait for them to do that? Daoist who asked after another round of attacks to no avail. The Tri-Water Beast Fusion spell didn't sound too promising. Although Lin Jin didn't know how this spell worked, the fact that Blackwater Taoist and the others used it as a last resort in times of crisis meant that it must be their greatest trump card. If he could stop this from happening, he would. Although Lin Jin was confident, he wasn't arrogant. Just then, Lin Jin sensed a ripple of energy. Stunned, he turned his head to look in the direction of the black wind tunnel. Brother Lin, what's wrong? Daoist who asked after noticing the anomaly. Lin Jin closed his eyes to sense it for a moment before saying, Wonderful. I was just thinking about how to break this yellow sand formation. I thought I'd need an incredibly sharp blade to break through the yellow sand formation in an instant. And now, I have this blade in my possession. Daoist who didn't quite understand what Lin Jin was saying. Just then, a sharp beam of light shot up into the sky from afar. Then, it flew over at an unbelievable speed. That's Daoist whose eyes widened. After taking a closer look, he finally saw what it was. It was the breezy monster sword. However, the breezy monster sword that was flying over was completely different from the one Daoist who was familiar with. Chapter 591. Amazing! Daoist Tiger, who knew his stuff, was startled by this. If this monster sword were to kill someone in the future, all it had to do was unsheath its blade, and its aura would be able to kill someone hundreds of feet away. Instinctively, Daoist Tiger touched his neck. This was indeed frightening. The breezy monster sword was able to break through half of the sand barrier with its aura alone. In the blink of an eye, the blade pierced through the sand and entered the formation. Lin Jin had given a strict order, so the breezy monster sword would do as he said. Once inside the formation, the blade glowed brightly, and a voice rang out. Those who surrender shall live, and those who fight shall perish. These 6 short words carried a domineering aura that threatened to kill anyone who disobeyed. Most of the Water God cult members were intimidated by the sword aura and didn't dare to move. However, there were some powerful desperados who continued to act as they pleased. In particular, Blackwater, Darkwater, and Crimson Water Taoist used their skills to attack the breezy monster sword. Slash! The Qingfeng demon sword's reaction was also very direct. A dazzling sword light flashed on the body of the sword, and then it slashed down from above. In an instant, a sword mark appeared on the ground. It was hundreds of feet long and hundreds of feet deep. Not only did it split the main hall of the Water God sect into 2, but it also killed many of the sect members who were resisting stubbornly. Crimson Water Taoist and his pet beast were the most miserable. Together with his pet beast, Crimson Water Taoist was cut into 2. Their bloody bodies fell to the ground, and Crimson Water Taoist's eyes were still filled with disbelief. However, he could no longer find an answer. He was killed by this attack. His soul was obliterated, and he couldn't be more dead. Not far away, Master Blackwater and Master Serene Water were trembling in fear. Their triple water beast fusion technique had failed. How were they supposed to fuse their pet beast now that their pet beast was dead? Block that sword for me. Black water bellowed. Many of the cult members rose to their feet and attacked. However, under the attack of the breezy monster sword, their attacks crumbled under the second attack. One of the cult members urged a pet beast that resembled a rhinoceros to charge forward. The rhinoceros pet beast was clad in a thick outer armor that looked like it was forged from metal. However, when the clear wind sword swept past, the rhinoceros was split into two. Its corpse fell to the ground, its internal organs spilling out. The same thing happened again and again in the following time. The members of the water god cult were known for their tyrannical ways of abusing the people. In terms of capabilities, they were quite capable. Quite a number of them had rank 3 pet beasts, and quite a number of them had rank 4 pet beasts as well.